Honourable members, the prayer. Lord, the God of righteousness and truth, grant to our King, to his government, to members of the Legislative Assembly, and to all in positions of responsibility, the guidance of your Spirit. May they never lead the province wrongly through love of power, desire to please, or unworthy ideas, but laying aside all private interest and prejudice, keep in mind their responsibility to seek to improve the condition of all. Amen. Honourable members, it being the last sitting day of the week, we will now be led in the singing of God Save the King by Ms. Nicole Williams.
God save our gracious King, long live our noble King. God save the King, send him victorious, happy and glorious, long to reign over us. God save the King.
Honourable members, please be seated.
Introduction of visitors.
Honourable members, as a former municipal councillor, I have a deep appreciation for the hard working of our local officials, so it's my great pleasure to introduce a special visitor joining us in the Speakers Gallery today. Mayor Gerard Albers, the Mayor of Lloydminster, is in Edmonton today visiting members here in the Assembly, including the Honourable Member for Vermilion Lloydminster Wainwright. I invite him to please rise and receive the warm welcome of the Assembly.
Introduction of guests.
Honourable members, prior to moving to school groups, you may notice that there are a few pages in the gallery today. I intend to introduce them at a later point, which will be making a statement with respect to retiring pages. We will do that in a number of moments. The Minister of Tourism and Sport has a school group to introduce.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to rise and introduce to you and through you the students from Calvin Christian School in my constituency. They're here having a day visiting the legislature and seeing a little bit about what we do. I ask them to rise in the gallery and receive the warm welcome of this assembly.
The Honourable Minister of Environment.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. To you and through you, I rise to introduce a constituent of mine, Darren Mraz. Darren is currently a teacher with Calgary Catholic School Division. He's been teaching for 35 years. He's very passionate and does exceptional advocacy for education here in our province. He is a proud husband, father, and currently the Calgary District Rep of the ATA. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of this Assembly.
The Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise and introduce to you and through you to all members of the Assembly the Premier's Council on the Status of Persons with Disabilities, Dominic Shaw, who's our chair, Heath Burkles, Sheeno Nakin, Jacob McGregor, Katie Savanto, and Earl Thiessen. I ask that they rise and receive the traditional warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Lesser Slave Lake.
Mr. Speaker, it's game day in oil country. I rise today to introduce to you and through you John, Gary, Colin, and Ella, all contributors to our energy and oil industry. Colin's the CEO of TerraPro. Gary's a VP of Michelle's Pipeline. And Mr. Speaker, I'm super happy that they're all Oiler fans as well. P.S. Oilers in 6. Please rise and accept the warm welcome.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our society is as strong as its seniors, and I'm glad to rise today and introduce to you and through you a strong group of seniors representing Millwood Seniors Association. I would request them to rise and accept the traditional warm welcome of the House.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Ellerslie.
Mr. Speaker, to you and through you, to all the members of the Assembly, it's an honour to introduce 50 members and volunteers of the seniors group of the Pakistan Canada Association of Edmonton. So many wonderful people. The primary organizer is Arshad Mahmood, who's also the president of the Jaza Relief Canada, a charity serving Canada and Pakistan. I ask them all to rise. Please give them the warm welcome of the Assembly.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Southwest.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to introduce to you and through you a member of, a dedicated and fantastic member of my constituency team, Jacob Moffat. Jacob is sadly going back to school shortly, but his service to Edmonton Southwest is so appreciated. And I'm also pleased to welcome his partner, Taylor Moffat, as well as their littlest one, Eleanor Millie Moffat, who's only 3.5 months old. Please rise and receive the warm welcome of this assembly.
I hope throughout question period we can conduct ourselves in a manner that won't wake the baby. The honourable member for Camrose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm glad to rise today and introduce to you and through you Bharati and Dr. Rajesh, who are visiting their daughter Disha, who moved from Melbourne to call Edmonton your home. So please rise to receive the warm welcome of this chamber.
The honourable member for Calgary Northeast.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to introduce to you and through you Mr. Parminder Jawal, an excellent team organizer and a dear friend who worked hard to get me here. He is also joined by his cousin Tajinder Singh, who is visiting Alberta from England, UK. I ask Parminder and Tajinder to please rise and receive the traditional warm welcome.
The honourable member for Calgary Buffalo. Does the honourable member for Calgary Buffalo have an introduction?
Nope.
Nope. The honourable member for Fort McMurray Wood Buffalo I have on the list. Are there others that have an introduction? Seeing none. Prior to moving to member statements, I would like to take the opportunity to invite those retiring pages who are here in the gallery, or sorry, correction, in the chamber, or perhaps in the back, if there's any of them, if they want to come join me at the dais. I have a statement. It's okay if you're a retiring page, please join me here. I have a statement to read. As honourable members will know, that at the conclusion or nearing the conclusion of each legislative session, a number of pages move on to other important work beyond the confines of this chamber. And each year, the pages take the opportunity to write a letter to members of the Assembly and to the Speaker, in which I will now read to you. Mr. Speaker, it is with a somewhat melancholy sense of accomplishment that we, the retiring pages, look forward to the end of session and our departure from the page program. As we reflect upon our time in the program, we are filled with gratitude for the opportunities we have been granted in serving the Alberta Legislative Assembly as the proverbial hands and feet of democracy. In particular, we'd like to thank Monique Hamlin and the Sergeant-at-Arms Office for their care in overseeing the page program, the Bills and Journals clerk for their guidance and depth of procedural knowledge, and the Legislative Assembly Security Service for their work in keeping us all safe and unquestionably entertained. Additionally, we'd like to extend our thanks to you, Mr. Speaker, as well as all of the table officers for your role in facilitating the democratic process of in our beautiful province, and of course, to the members of the Legislative Assembly for their commitment to Albertans and their dedication in representing their constituents. The memories we have made during our service in the Legislative Assembly are unforgettable, and the experience we have gained is invaluable. Rest assured that all of you have inspired us immensely, whether or not we intend to pursue a political career. And so, to each and every one of you, and without a doubt to our fellow pages, thank you. Thank you for considering us to be, quote, note, unquote, worthy individuals. Sincerely and signed by the retiring or departing pages, Andrew C. Head Page, Natalia H. Team Lead, Andrew O. Team Lead, Veronica, Miriam, Honan, Annika, Hannah, Grace, Taylor, Parker, Nabia, and Niles. Please rise and receive the thank you of the Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Member statements.
The honourable member for Edmonton Riverview has a statement to make.
The UCP government has demonstrated they feel entitled to power, but not to do the work to govern. Nowhere else is that more obvious than with the cases of motel medicine. You'll recall that the Premier herself called for this policy. In her leadership race, the Premier mused about discharging healthcare patients into motels rather than getting them the appropriate levels of care that they need. Well, she got her wish. This spring, this government discharged medical patients in some of our province's most vulnerable residents to a motel down the highway in Leduc. It may be a fine motel, but it certainly wasn't a place for a patient in a wheelchair to be left by himself without proper care, nutrition, or medical treatment. It was bad enough this happened to one individual who needed proper medical care, but the agency involved left 27 Albertans without the supports they need in that motel. So what did the government do about it? Well, they tried to be saviors after sweeping in after the fact. But this week, a Freedom of Information request revealed the UCP ministers have known all along about this crisis. The request also reveals they knew about substandard care, but didn't do anything about it. When the health minister was notified of serious neglect by the agency, Contentment Social Services, she passed the buck. When the seniors minister got involved, he threw up his hands and told this Albertan they weren't going to do anything and recommended they call 211 for help. Motel medicine came along because this government feels entitled to power, but doesn't feel they have any responsibility to actually use that power to make the lives of Albertans better. Mr. Speaker, Albertans and our loved ones deserve so much better.
The honourable member for Camrose has a statement.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today marks a significant milestone for Albertans' aging population as our government announced a groundbreaking funding agreement with the federal government under the banner of Aging with Dignity. This collaboration signifies a concerted effort to strengthen Alberta's health care system, ensuring that our seniors receive the highest quality care as they journey through their later years. Our government's commitment of $1 billion over 3 years underscores our dedication to transforming continuing care in our province. This substantive agreement will facilitate a shift towards community-based care, enhanced workforce capacity, foster innovation, and elevate the overall quality of care within the sector. The newly inked 5-year, $627 million bilateral funding agreement with the federal government is a testament to our shared vision of supporting aging Albertans. These funds will be allocated towards vital home care and assisted living initiatives and enriched services, enhancing access to palliative and end-of-life care, bolstering caregiving support, and expanding non-medical assistance. Our province has also earmarked $654 million over 3 years for the Continuing Care Capital Program aimed at accessing enhanced care for spaces. This initiative will only alleviate pressure on hospital beds, but also ensure that Albertans receive tailored support in suitable environments, which will reduce emergency department wait times. As demographics shift and our population ages, the demand for senior care increases. By 2046, 1 in 5 Albertans will be 65 years of age or older, necessitating proactive measures to meet this growing need. Our ongoing transformation efforts encompass a multifaceted approach, encompassing regulatory enhancements, expanded support networks for caregivers, and empowering individuals with choice through client-directed care. In closing, I'd like to thank the Minister and all stakeholders involved in spearheading this work in reform.
The honourable member for Edmonton Glenora.
A day and a half after I was sworn in as a health minister, I hopped in my beat-up red old Honda Fit hatchback, got on the QE2 and drove straight to the Peter Lougheed Hospital in Calgary. The management there didn't know what to expect from the new minister, so they had 3 spots coned off, waiting for my entourage and me, and I got out by myself, closed the door, shook the hands of all these men wearing suits and white coats and said, "Show me around the place." That was the day we started building the Calgary Cancer Hospital. And I will argue that is the most NDP thing we could have possibly done, build a public hospital that was desperately needed in the province of Alberta. And now we have to decide what we're going to do next. I'm I'm proposing that we hire 1,000 family doctors. BC's NDP government recruited 500 family doctors in their first year. I know we can do 1,000 here. I've been working with the leaders to make sure it'll happen. I'm also proposing 3,000 nurse practitioners and physician assistants, that we expand long-term care by 1,500 public long-term care spaces in the province of Alberta, and that we expand home care, that we make sure that we have staffing ratios in continuing care centres so that we don't continue to ask staff to do more when it's just physically not possible, and that we ensure that the residents of those places have a dignified place to age and receive their care. I'm also proposing that those staff get a living wage, that they be able to work in one centre, getting full-time hours and benefits, which is better for patient care and is certainly better for those staff as well. I also want us to expand our emergency room operating hours in public centres. We don't need to keep building more private for-profit surgical centres when we have emergency rooms that often shut down at 4 o'clock or 6 o'clock. We can expand those hours during the day and we can into the evening, and we can also make sure that they're open on the weekends. We can treat staff and patients with care and respect. We can have the world-class public health care system we all deserve. Please visit my plan. It is unapologetically NDP, just like me. Thank you.
The honourable member for Red Yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May 9 was a good day at the Alberta Legislature. I attended the March for Life, Mr. Speaker. There are many friends there, Mr. Speaker, including some UCP MLAs. That is good. Alberta is a land that loves freedom of conscience. Mr. Speaker, the march was also very good. It was packed. There are many Albertans sharing pro-life values. Now, Mr. Speaker, there were some opposing the march, not acting in respectful ways. But the march organizers gave them no heed. They came to celebrate the sacred gift of children, not to contend. I loved attending, Mr. Speaker. Families are sacred. Children are a blessing. We love them, Mr. Speaker. We love our families. One of the speakers at the march was a mother with her beautiful daughter. She was about 8. She had Down syndrome, Mr. Speaker. With her daughter standing with her, the mother shared her story. Her doctor encouraged her to abort her daughter. Mr. Speaker, that is very sad. Every man and woman is a beloved child of God. All of our great worth, Mr. Speaker. This beautiful mother shared her joy in making the decision to choose the sacred role of mother to this beautiful young woman, how her beautiful daughter was a blessing from God. It is true, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a correct understanding of truth produces eternal perspective, not choosing abortion, recognizing the divine worth of all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Banff Kananaskis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In late April, I got a call from a proud Tsuut'ina mother, Cookham, and community member. When her son's best friend died, she immediately jumped at the opportunity to foster his 3 children. On April 5th, Child and Family Services conducted a home safety check and approved my constituent to foster the baby of the 3 children. 4 days later, Child and Family Services came and took the baby from her without explanation. While my constituent, her daughter, and the baby cried, the staff person laughed and said the baby would be okay. All 3 children are now living with non-Indigenous families in the city. In my constituent's words, while my ancestors and my child felt the pain and realization, this is what my great-grandparents and grandparents and parents felt as the residential schools ripped away children and never brought them back. And it's still happening. In December 2022, 74% of youth in care were Indigenous, even though they only make up 10% of the population. Between 2012 and 2022, 634 children in care died or were seriously injured, and 2/3 of those were Indigenous. Alberta has the lowest percentage of Indigenous children in the care of at least one Indigenous foster parent. This is unacceptable. We know that removing children from their communities and culture is at the heart of the intergenerational trauma sustained by Indigenous people that has led to the poverty, addiction, lack of self-worth or identity, and depression that many Indigenous people experience. The UCP does not currently have a specific plan to provide mental health and addiction support for Indigenous people in Alberta, yet they're still contributing to the principal root cause by removing Indigenous children from their communities. I like to think that residential schools, the 60s scoop, the millennial scoop are part of our history, but they're part of our present too. We know better. On this side of the House, we believe that truth and reconciliation is about taking action, and that starts with ensuring Indigenous children live in their community with their kin and families.
Honourable members, the time is now 1:50, and that makes it oral question period. And the Leader of His Majesty's Loyal Opposition has question 1.
Mr. Speaker, when folks in Fort McMurray got the order to evacuate, they knew from experience not to question it. But they never expected when they returned home to learn their government through their evacuation, thought their evacuation was just too short to warrant financial support. It's a sharp contrast from what they received in 2016. So to the Premier, will she ensure that all evacuees from Fort McMurray receive financial support for the expenses they incurred while they were forced to leave their homes, even if it was for less than 7 days?
The Honourable the Premier is risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is the policy of the government that after 7 days of being evacuated from home, residents will receive a payment of $12.50 for an adult and $500 for a child. Part of the reason for that policy is that we offer a great deal of support that is paid for directly by government. We offer hotel vouchers, we offer food, we give other emergency assistance as needed. The notion behind the policy is that once somebody has been beyond 7 days outside their home, that's when it becomes far more financially difficult, and that's part of the reason why we have the balance. We are giving people the support that they need. We're very pleased that Fort McMurray residents were able to return home.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, a recent poll found that more than half of Albertans find it hard to cover their monthly bills at the best of times. An unplanned trip down the highway with kids and pets to overfilled motels is not something they have room for in their budget, and it's not something they got fully compensated for. And it doesn't matter how many days it was. So to the Premier, this was no vacation. Why has she not taken immediate action to get these folks the financial support they very clearly describe needing?
The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is the same policy the members opposite had when they were in government. The difference in 2016, it was very clear very early on that that was going to be an extended time, that individuals were going to be outside the community. What our role is to make sure that we fight the fire, get the conditions safe to return as quickly as possible, work in a unified command with a local firefighting team, and ensure that people are able to get back home. People want to be able to get back home, get their lives back in order, and make sure that their community is safe, and we're very pleased that they were able to do this past weekend.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, this is a Premier who, she has the capacity to change the policy as she sees fit. I mean, for heaven's sake, she rushed to change the laws to increase the size of gifts she could get as Premier. So recently, while these families were worrying over their evacuation costs, she was sitting in a fancy box at an NHL playoff game in BC. So to the Premier, how can she justify rushing to change the policy for her own posh perks, but dragging her feet to help evacuated Alberta families get to the end of the month?
The Honourable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We established evacuation centres. We had vouchers that were given for hotels. There were vouchers that were given for food. There's an additional program for those who have additional hardship that they can apply for through Seniors Community and Social Services. We want to make sure that people are supported when they leave, and also that they are returned home as quickly as they possibly can be. We're very pleased in this situation that very few people have had to be outside of their home for more than a few days, and I hope that will continue throughout the rest of the fire season.
The Honourable the Leader of the Opposition for a second set of questions.
Well, Mr. Speaker, leaders in municipalities, large and small, have been speaking out against this Premier's authoritarian Bill 20, with broad agreement that the bill is so anti-democratic it needs to be scrapped. Of course, this Premier has been ignoring every voice but her own. It's been 3 weeks, the House is now winding down, and we've yet to see amendments tabled. So to the Premier, why won't she admit that this bill is bad to the core and should just be abandoned?
The Honourable the Premier is risen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think there's 20 different provisions that are in this bill that change and clarify rules in the Local Elections Act, as well as change and clarify some supports that we're prepared to offer to make it easier to build affordable housing. It's true that there were 2 clauses that we heard loud and clear from municipalities that they would like us to provide more clarity around. The circumstances under which a council member might face a recall vote, as well as the circumstances under which a bylaw might be overridden. And the members opposite will see those amendments in the coming day.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the amendments haven't been tabled yet, but based on how unpopular and poorly drafted Bill 20 is with key stakeholders, it's quite reasonable to assume those amendments are going to need a lot of work. So to the Premier, will she commit that the current plan to limit debate on the amendments will be abandoned, and that the government will withdraw it, and that debate and consultation and amendment will continue until the majority of municipal stakeholders are actually in support of what is now an incredibly draconian piece of legislation?
The Honourable the Premier has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My Minister of Municipal Affairs has reached out to the heads of the municipal associations to get their feedback on how to amend a couple of the clauses that their members had expressed concern about. And so those amendments will come forward this afternoon. We will have fulsome debate. We have early indication that the approach that we're taking is one that will be widely accepted by the municipalities, and so I look forward to seeing the debate this afternoon.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It appears as though the plan to limit remains in place. Irony is not dead, Mr. Speaker. This Premier is blocking debate more times in this sitting than ever. And with Bill 20, she's not just shutting down debate here, she's shutting down Albertans' ability to speak in town halls all across the province. To the Premier, has she grown allergic to the grassroots? And does she not see that her top-down, heavy-handed, my voice is the only one that counts approach goes against absolutely everything she claimed to be about in the last election?
The Honourable the Premier.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I was in opposition, I took pride in supporting the government in about 75% of their bills. We didn't obstruct absolutely everything that came forward, unlike the members opposite. And so when we put forward a bill, we have a number of different means to make sure that we are going in the right direction. We have social media, we have people calling our offices, we have meetings, we take time between the different readings, and when we identify a problem, we bring
order. The Honourable the Premier.
And when we identify a problem or something that needs clarity, we bring forward amendments. That's how the process works. And the members opposite will see the amendments to Bill 20 this afternoon.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Glenmore has a question.
The Premier's friend David Yeager got a sole source contract to review the Alberta Energy Regulator. After his short, few-page, $70,000 report, this Premier appointed him to the AR board. One of the report findings was to review board compensation. So let me get this straight. We have a UCP insider paid to review the AR who then recommends that board members should be paid more, and the government appoints him to that board. Does the minister really think that after the AR scandals and failures, the board deserves higher pay? Yeah, good question.
The Honourable the Minister of Energy and Minerals.
Mr. Speaker, the NDP bringing up this question time and again only reminds Albertans of how they let a scam go on during the Alberta Energy Regulator when they were government, Mr. Speaker. A scam, a criminal scam, Mr. Speaker, that was trying to take money from the hard-working people of Alberta for their own personal gain. Now, that's the kind of management that those folks hire, Mr. Speaker. We hire people that are experts in the field. Mr. Speaker, for instance, what they did during their time and tenure also, Mr. Speaker, and I should point out that when they held and hired people under sole source contracts, they hired non-Albertans. When we hire experts, as most governments do, we hire Albertans. That's a big difference right there, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Glenmore.
It is wildly wildly inappropriate, Mr. Speaker. In addition to this review, the UCP paid their buddy, David Yeager, another $136,000 sole source contract for professional services. The AER, which is supposed to be arm's length, has a board member who's getting paid directly by the government. So much for independence. Sounds like entitlement to me. The AER should be independent from the Premier's office. Will the minister promise that their pal, David Yeager, won't get more paychecks from the government while he's appointed to the AER?
The Honourable Minister of Energy and Minerals.
Well, it's true, Mr. Yeager did receive compensation from the government. I believe the numbers the member's referring to is over a 2-year period, though, Mr. Speaker. And it's also true that Mr. Yeager in the private sector could be paid a lot more money, but he's actually very focused on the AER because he knows how important the Alberta Energy Regulator is, Mr. Speaker, not just to Alberta, not just to Albertans, but to the world. It's very important, Mr. Speaker. I would think that those members opposite, when they have a chance to fix the issues with energy security and an energy poverty in the world with Albertans' resources, they would take us up on that, Mr. Speaker, and use the best people possible to make that.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Glenmore.
David Yeager's 70,000, 30-something page review found that the UCP undermined the AER with a 20% staff reduction that resulted in, quote, the loss of highly skilled and experienced staff with no significant internal measures to pass on or preserve their knowledge of the organization, which resulted in failures from consulting, reporting, dealing with Indigenous communities, and failing to deal with the growing liability of abandoned wells. Can the minister explain how the Premier's friend receiving over $130,000 while being a board member will fix this? It is wildly inappropriate.
The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Yeager is one of Alberta's most experienced and respected analysts and commentators on energy. He has led significant oil service companies in Alberta. He has worked as an industry consultant for independent major accounting firms, Mr. Speaker. He has been the chair of PSAC. For those people that don't know, Mr. Speaker, that's the Petroleum Services Association of Canada. David Yeager ran HSE, one of Alberta's largest oil field safety companies. He wrote Miracle to Menace, Mr. Speaker, and they should read it, Mr. Speaker. It should be mandatory reading for all people that want to understand the oil and gas industry in Canada. David Yeager chaired the Alberta's Energy Future Panel. He's the best.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Elbow is next.
Mr. Speaker, too many Albertans are finding the cost of living crisis to be too much to handle because this government has taken no actions to make life more affordable. In Calgary, food bank usage has skyrocketed. CEO Melissa Frum said that no matter how hard folks work, Alberta's high inflation is making things worse. Mr. Speaker, Calgary has the highest inflation of any major city in Canada, but this government cancelled the promised tax reductions, hiked fuel taxes, and even introduced a home buying tax in their budget. Why is this government doing nothing for Albertans falling further and further behind?
The Honourable Minister of Affordability and Utilities.
Mr. Speaker, this government is proud to stand up for Albertans and do an enormous amount of work, making sure that we are providing the services they need all across the board. Every single ministry is doing the work to make sure that life becomes more affordable and more predictable for all Albertans. We are doing the work that we can do. The number one attribute that is contributing to the cost of inflation and the rise of costs in Alberta is the federal carbon tax, which the members opposite and their party in Ottawa continue to support. We ask them to stand up for Albertans and help us do the right thing.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Elbow.
Mr. Speaker, polling data released today said the majority of Albertans are finding it hard to meet their monthly expenses. Visible minorities, young people, and people with kids at home are finding it more and more difficult to pay for the high cost of living. But instead of growing the economy for everyone, wage growth is the lowest in Canada. People's salaries aren't keeping up. The minimum wage is the third lowest in Canada, and unemployment is at some of the highest levels across all provinces. Why won't this government focus on wage growth for Albertans who are increasingly finding it harder than ever to make ends meet?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade.
Mr. Speaker, cost of living is a concern across Canada. And can Alberta do better? That's a question Albertans asked from 2015 to 2019, and they knew the answer was yes, which is why they replaced the former NDP government with a Conservative government. And instead of having 13 months consecutive of people leaving Alberta for opportunity, we are now at 24 months of Canadians coming to Alberta because it has the best combination of opportunity and cost of living in Canada.
Here, here. The Honourable Member for Calgary Elbow.
Mr. Speaker, Albertans are losing ground to inflation every single month, and there's nothing to brag about in that. What's driving those numbers are low wage growth and the higher than ever costs of housing. Rent prices are skyrocketing, but this government takes no action. And even getting into the housing market is increasingly more and more out of reach. Parents are looking at a future where their children will never own a home. This government has done nothing to make life more affordable. Why has this government focused on their own entitlements to power and their attacks on democracy rather than getting the fundamentals of good quality of life and affordable?
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is right. When they were in power, they built no houses and created a housing crisis in our province. Under 1,500 houses, Mr. Speaker. This government announced more than that this month alone.
The Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Really don't like it when I point out their record, Mr. Speaker. So how about I point out our record? We have the fastest growing housing starts anywhere in the country, up 67%, Mr. Speaker, when the rest of the country is down 10%. Up 64% in the city that we're in right now, Mr. Speaker. Above 50% up in the city of Calgary. Mr. Speaker, we are going to continue to take action, build more homes, and make sure Albertans have a place to live, Mr. Speaker, and we're not going to do these socialist ideas that are destroying this province.
Point of order is noted by the Honourable the Government House Leader at 2:06. The member for Edmonton Whitemud has a question.
This year, Albertans have witnessed a stunning lack of respect by the UCP for seniors and those needing care. They eliminated the minimum hours of care for seniors in continuing care, and they continue to support Greg Christensen, a bad actor who is withholding millions of dollars owed to Alberta seniors. Now this week that we learned that, you guessed it, Christensen Companies is laying off all the health care aides in the Devonshire Care Centre in my riding and slashing their hours. This will absolutely impact the care these seniors need. Is this what the Minister of Health considers respect for Alberta seniors?
The Honourable the Minister of Health is risen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, nothing can be further from the truth. The members opposite continue to misrepresent what is an actual fact. Mr. Speaker, under the new continuing care legislation, Mr. Speaker, we actually have more than doubled the amount of time that seniors are getting, Mr. Speaker. We're funding over 3.9 hours, I believe it is. So, Mr. Speaker, the member opposite needs to get her facts straight.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Whitemud.
Well, given that the facts are that the seniors in my riding are going to be getting less care, given that any Albertan who has ever had relatives in continuing care centres or knows someone who works in one understands the importance of appropriate and quality care, and given that reducing staffing levels and hours of care will obviously seriously impact these seniors, and given that Devonshire Care Centre is doing this right now, eliminating full-time healthcare aides directly affecting the seniors in my riding, will the minister acknowledge that under her watch, care for seniors is getting worse?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
I will acknowledge no such thing because it is not true, Mr. Speaker. In fact, Mr. Speaker, we brought in continuing care legislation, which actually took effect as of April 1st, Mr. Speaker. It modernized continuing care. We've added $1 billion over 3 years to transform the continuing care legislation. We've added permanent increases by $2 an hour for health care aides, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to make sure that our seniors who actually have built this province get the respect that they deserve and the care that they deserve.
The Honourable Member.
Well, given that the healthcare aides that work in the centre in my riding are now getting fewer hours and are getting laid off, so any increases in pay are going to be affected by the fact that they're not working as much. And given that these workers make barely $20 an hour, they often have to work 2 jobs to support their families, and they are rallying outside of the Devonshire Care Centre in my riding as we speak. Perhaps the minister would like to explain to them why, as of April 1st, the effect of the legislation she brought in, they are going to have less money in their pocket and provide a lower level of care to the seniors in my riding.
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the member opposite continues to create fear within the community. Mr. Speaker, over $1 billion. We announced the Aging with Dignity.
The Honourable the Minister of Health has the call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the members opposite don't really like to listen to the answers that we give, but Mr. Speaker, we have many initiatives that we are continuing to provide, including building more continuing care spaces across this province, over $658 million in capital infrastructure. Mr. Speaker, more dollars going to operational expenses as well. We'll continue to look after our seniors.
The honourable member for Grand Prairie Wapiti has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Alberta's economy and population are booming thanks to this government's focus on growth, diversification and affordability. While we are proud to welcome ambitious newcomers and job creators, growth does bring some challenges. To grow our infrastructure, meet the needs and demands for housing, and fill the vacancies in our workforce, we need more skilled trades workers. To the Minister of Advanced Education, how is Alberta's government encouraging young people to consider a career in skilled trades?
The Honourable the Minister of Advanced Education.
Thank you to the honourable member for that question, Mr. Speaker. I'm extremely proud to share that Advanced Education has appointed an advisory council of skilled trades youth ambassadors. The 12 ambassadors are forward-thinking young Albertans actively engaged in the skilled trades. Each has been nominated by their post-secondary institution based on performance excellence on their apprenticeship path. They will support our work to champion the trades by providing recommendations to improve awareness for young Albertans about the opportunities in the trades. I'm very grateful for the wealth of talent and passion that they bring to this important project.
Member for Grand Prairie Wapiti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister for her response. It sounds like an innovation strategy that every member should be proud of to support. Given that education in the trades is just as valuable as a university degree, and further given the tremendous opportunities available to students in the skilled trades with unique experiences that lead students to pursue an apprenticeship, Mr. Speaker, has the Minister of Advanced Education had the opportunity to meet with students in the trades and gather feedback and hear their stories?
Well, the Minister of Advanced Education.
Mr. Speaker, at Red Deer Polytechnic, I had the opportunity to meet Ben Rainworth, a 2023 Skills Canada gold medalist in welding. Ben was raised in Lacombe, where his father, also a welder, fixed everything himself on the farm. Through his high school shop classes and attending the 2009 World Skills Competition in Calgary, Ben decided his future was in welding. Now Ben will be representing Canada and Alberta at the 2023 World Skills Competition in Lyon, France. Mr. Speaker, from a farm in Lacombe to competing on the international stage in France, opportunities in the trades unlock doors to the future.
The honourable member for Grand Prairie Wapiti.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister. That's an inspiring story, and I hope more Albertans have the chance to hear it. Given that Alberta's government is committed to supporting opportunities for students along with the needs of job creators, and given that the trades offer students a pathway to an affordable education in high-demand fields, and given the important role that trades play in supporting affordability and a strong economy, how else is the Minister of Advanced Education supporting the trades in Alberta?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Budget 2024 invests $24 million per year over the next 3 years to create 3,200 apprenticeship seats at 11 post-secondary institutions across the province. We signed a historic agreement with the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 955 to deliver crane operator apprenticeship training. The Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade announced a third phase of the Alberta is Calling campaign with a $5,000 refundable tax credit to attract more skilled workers. And Mr. Speaker, next week we will have more good news to share with our friends at NATE.
The honourable member for Calgary Foothills has a question to ask.
Mr. Speaker, we have heard from the Minister of Technology and Innovation that now is the best time for a technology company in Alberta. But last year, venture capital firms hit the pause button on Alberta with investments flatlining. And now with their anti-democratic entitled agenda, the UCP is putting even more at risk. With uncertainty in the venture capital markets, why is the Minister of Technology and Innovation still supporting Bill 18, the Gatekeeper Act, that will impact the number of investable startups companies in Alberta?
The Honourable the Minister of Technology and Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud to say that even just today I was meeting with some venture capital investors. And you know what they said to me, Mr. Speaker? They said, Alberta is the place to watch. It's the place to be. Mr. Speaker, we're not going to listen to the nonsense from the other side because we know what it actually takes to build a strong tech sector that is growing and thriving. When they were in government, they saw $30 million a year of investment into venture deals. We're seeing over $700 million a year over the last 2 years, all at a time when the Canadian market was on the decline. Mr. Speaker, I am confident that we are on the right track, that our government is laying the foundation for a strong tech future for all Albertans.
The Honourable Member for Calgary Foothills.
So, given that our province has the proven ability to generate research, translate research into innovations, and commercialize those innovations into new products and companies, given that the companies born out of Canadian Institutes of Health Research include companies like 48 Hour Discovery from right here in Edmonton and the University of Alberta, given that these companies are raising capital rounds, generating revenue, hiring people, and growing our economy, given that the UCP is now rushing to limit debate on Bill 18, why is the Minister of Technology and Innovation willing to put future opportunities like this at risk by supporting Bill 18?
The Honourable the Minister of Technology and Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, like I said, we know a thing or two about building a strong tech sector. We've got a government that has laid the foundation to see record levels of increase in tech investment. And you know what, Mr. Speaker, I'm bringing all of the experience and all of my past networks as a former venture investor myself to this government to make sure we are taking the right steps forward, and I'm confident we're on the right track. Mr. Speaker, of course research from our post-secondaries is important because that's where a lot of spin-off companies come from. And of course we will work closely with our post-secondary partners. I speak with the presidents of our major universities all the time, and I can tell you that we are on the right track and we will not be blocking any important technology investment required.
The Honourable Member.
Given that Edmonton has placed considerable focus on developing the health and life sciences sector, including support to Health City, given that BioAlberta and API are working to advance health and life sciences here in Alberta, given that companies like Bavi Protech have spun out of the University of Alberta and growing the health tech ecosystem after the founder received funding from the Canadian Institutes for Health Research, will the Minister agree with the concerns being raised about Bill 18, or is he, along with this government, so entitled that they will continue to push it forward?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the member opposite clearly does not know his history of what's happened in Canada. The fact is, in Quebec, they have very similar legislation, and they have found a way to make it work. Mr. Speaker, we will also find a way to make this work so that we can ensure that Alberta's priorities are protected, ensure that we are getting fair funding from Ottawa towards our research priorities, but also ensuring that we are able to attract venture investment into the important spin-off companies that come out of our post-secondary institutions. The NDP are all about we can't do anything. Over here, Mr. Speaker, we are a can-do government, we are a can-do province, and we are going to get the job done. Mr. Speaker, that is what we can promise to Albertans.
Order, order, order. The Honourable Government House Leader is called a point of order at 2:17. The member for Edmonton Gold Bar has a question to ask.
Mr. Speaker, after nearly 50 years of free access for Albertans, the UCP decided that Kananaskis needed a toll booth, pulling more than $15 million from Albertans' pockets just to access this beautiful landscape. During an affordability crisis, they decided to add yet another strain on family budgets. Albertans aren't thrilled. One such Albertan called the scheme totally ridiculous. That Albertan was our very own Premier. It's been 2 years since she condemned the K-Pass. When will she finally cancel this cash grab? Or is this just another broken promise?
The Honourable the Minister of Forestry and Parks.
Very much, Mr. Speaker, and thanks for the question. We know that Kananaskis is a busy place. About 4 million people a year go to Kananaskis, enjoy the beauty there. And we know that with the K-Pass, that money goes directly back into Kananaskis to help fund the important things that people need to do and want to do there. We're expanding trails. We have partners that are working with trail management and trail improvements there. In fact, this year we give, I think, $940,000 worth of grants to people in that area. We use that money for enforcement to make sure that people are following the rules and making sure that we're protecting our great spaces there in the Kananaskis country.
Member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Given that the Premier declared Kananaskis was always supposed to be that open access place for Albertans, and charging a $90 park pass to access our own backyard is completely irrational and unreasonable, and given that she's on record agreeing with the Leader of the Opposition that these fees are a heavy burden on families, especially with the cost of everything else skyrocketing, and given that here we are still paying $90 for a park pass and $43 a night for an unreserved camping site when, let's be honest, Albertans need lower living costs, more campsites and fewer fees, not more red tape. Will the Premier finally honour her campaign promise and axe the pass?
The Honourable the Minister of Forestry and Parks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the member for that question. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the money that we spend in Kananaskis, the K-Pass does not cover the amount of money that we put into Kananaskis because we know it's important. The NDP, of course, they didn't maintain the parks, they didn't maintain the trails, they didn't do the good work that we're doing, and we're spending that money in the areas to make sure that the people of Alberta and the people that come to visit Alberta have a place to go and something great to do when they get there so that they can go home and tell other people, and more people come to visit our great areas here in Alberta.
Full member.
Given that the Premier tells Albertans that she agrees with them, and she agrees with the Leader of the Opposition that the K-Pass is completely bogus, and given that she has realized that the cost of living for Albertans is soaring under her government while she's been busy catering to her far-right supporters, and given that, according to her, the idea that somehow we're going to improve things and improve access by charging Albertans more money is a solution that is simply foolish. Will the Premier, for once, do what she knows is right and axe the pass, or are we stuck with this absurd fee while we wait for her to catch up with her own?
The Honourable Minister of Forestry and Parks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I think it's pretty rich to have the NDP talking about the expenses of Albertans and the cost of living when they and their supporters supported the carbon tax. They brought in the carbon tax, they didn't campaign on it, and now they're talking about cost of living and inflation. Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable the Minister of Forestry and Parks is the one with the call.
So, Mr. Speaker, when we look at the K-Pass and we look at the money that it generates and the money that goes back into Kananaskis to support the good things that people of Alberta want to do when they go out on the long weekend in May and other times around the year, again, we're not taking any lessons from the NDP when it comes to affordability.
Order. The Honourable Member for Grand Prairie is next.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's no surprise that the federal government is continuing with their series of punitive, ideologically driven, out of touch, and ill-advised policies and regulations, ones that damage Alberta and Canada as a whole. Their track record of not caring and not understanding the repercussions of their decisions continues with the federal government's Zero Plastic Waste Initiative. With this initiative impacting agricultural plastics and food manufacturers, to the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation, what concerns does Alberta government have with the Zero Plastic Waste Initiative?
The Honourable point of order is noted at 2:22. The Honourable the Minister of Agriculture and Irrigation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the member for this question. As Albertans and Canadians continue to battle with high food prices, you'd think it'd be obvious that the federal government should be supporting the ag industry, the people who produce that food. And yet the feds are doing the exact opposite with their Zero Plastic Waste Initiative. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Environment and Protected Areas and I have already sent a letter to the federal minister making it clear that this federal initiative will burden producers and food manufacturers, destabilize food security, drive out investment, and increase food prices for all Canadians.
Honourable Member for Grand Prairie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that in 2023, the Ministry of Agriculture and Irrigation announced the Agri-Processing Investment Tax Credit to attract large-scale investment in value-added agriculture manufacturing, and further given that the federal government's proposed recycling content requirement for plastic packaging, recyclability labeling rules, and the plastic reporting registry will increase costs and red tape, to the Minister of Agriculture, what effect would this federal Zero Plastic Waste Initiative have on Alberta's manufacturers and our growing agricultural processing investment?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member is absolutely correct. This initiative will negatively affect the growth in value-added agricultural processing we're seeing right now in the province. It will mean Alberta food manufacturers providing the same product for large retailers in the United States and in Canada. They will be forced to carry two types of packaging to satisfy the requirements in each country. Alternatives are also either not available or incredibly costly. Ultimately, this will decrease their competitive advantage. This will drive away investment all across in our value-added agri-processing industry.
For Grand Prairie.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that farmers and ranchers will face additional financial burdens through this initiative, and given that Alberta's farmers and ranchers are already leaders in sustainability and recycling agricultural plastics, and further given that increased costs at the production level often get passed down to consumers. Yeah. And when production costs go up, the price at the store goes up, Mr. Speaker, affecting affordability for all Albertans across our province. To the Minister of Agriculture, can you tell the House how the federal Zero Plastic Waste Initiative will impact farmers, ranchers, and consumers in Alberta and Canada?
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again to the member for the question. We know that any increased cost from this initiative will ultimately be passed on to consumers. Mr. Speaker, the recent hike to the federal carbon tax is already burdening farmers and ranchers, which means increased costs for both producers and consumers, and this initiative will only add to that. Mr. Speaker, hopefully the members opposite can phone the mothership, the Trudeau Liberal Alliance in the federal government, and maybe ask their bosses to reconsider that this policy will continue to drive up food prices to Canadians.
Order, order, order. The honourable member for Calgary-Falconridge has a question to ask.
Mr. Speaker, in Calgary-Falconridge, families are facing the high cost of living under the UCP. So many Albertans are worried about the state of their finances and about their abilities to make ends meet. A high cost of living is forcing families to make tough choices about paying rent, or buying food, paying the utility bill, or paying the car insurance. And what this means for many families is that the extracurricular events, like sports and other activities for kids, are lost. What is the government doing to support the families of Calgary-Falconridge and all Albertans in ensuring that their children access all the activities they need?
The Honourable the Minister of Sport and Tourism, the Government House Leader.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the member opposite for asking this very important question. The government, we believe, and I think all members of this chamber believe how important recreation and sport is for children and Albertans of all ages. That is why we feel strongly in supporting the Every Kid Can Play grant, which is an $8 million grant, which is increased from $4 million of Return to Play grant, which is coming out of COVID, making sure that youth can have the access to recreation, have their registration fees covered, so no one is left out on the sidelines.
The honourable member for Calgary-Falconridge.
Given that families in my community are having to give up getting their children vital exercise due to cost, given that there has been a lack of investment in sporting facilities, community groups, and local infrastructure in the entire Northeast Calgary, given that we know that sports for young Albertans is a great source of physical and mental health, and that we need places for youth to exercise, play sports, and grow, will the minister commit to providing the funding that the Northeast needs so that the families have more opportunities for their kids and sports?
The Honourable the Minister of Tourism and Sport.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the member opposite is definitely pushing on an open door. On this side of the House, we feel very strongly about making sure that kids and Albertans of all ages have a place to recreate. And we also know that the recreation facilities in the province aren't just a place for sports, they're also a place for getting together and building community. And that is why we've introduced the Active Communities Initiative, a $30 million grant program that allows nonprofits, community organizations, Métis settlements, Indigenous communities to apply for grants up to $1.5 million that are matching to make sure we're investing in new and refurbished infrastructure for sports and recreation.
The honourable member for Calgary-Falconridge.
Given that the NDP was ready to invest millions into important sport funding and community centres through the Hometown Alberta grant, that would invest in needed recreational infrastructure, hockey rinks, hockey grounds, soccer fields, and cricket pitches. Given that we know the importance of practicing sport to grow and invest into our communities for the future, and given that the UCP are not building the schools and other critical infrastructure that my constituents and all Northeast Calgarians need, what will it take for the UCP to stop ignoring Northeast Calgary and start delivering for them?
The Honourable Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you again to that member for the question. He clearly cares very deeply about his constituents and their ability to recreate and get out and build community. That is exactly why we have introduced the Active Communities Grant, which is available to all nonprofits, community societies, Métis settlements, and Indigenous communities around the entire province. So it's certainly not exclusive to one region of the province or another. Everyone's open to this grant to apply for it. The early interest application deadline is June 1st, so I encourage anyone watching or interested in applying for this grant to make sure they get that in before the deadline.
The honourable member for Camrose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's graduation season, which means I have the opportunity to attend many graduation ceremonies across the Camrose constituency. The bright and energetic students at these events reinforce my faith in the future of our province. However, many of these graduates have shared uncertainty they feel regarding their futures. Some are planning to take gap years so they have more time to find their vocation and choose the right career for them. Could the Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade highlight some of the growing sectors which could offer exciting opportunities for some of these students?
The Honourable the Minister of Jobs, Economy and Trade.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have great news for those graduating students. There are opportunities in many exciting fields thanks to our growing and diversifying economy. We have a huge need in the skilled trades due to massive investments from companies like Dow Chemicals and their $11 billion Path to Zero facility. And we need to build infrastructure, schools and housing to meet the needs of our growing population. By 2033, we are expecting an additional 40,000 openings in the skilled trades. Alberta has also seen significant investment in aviation and aerospace, with the likes of de Havilland selecting Wheatland County for their new facility and WestJet centering their operations in Calgary. We're forecasting 4,500 openings for pilots, flight engineers, mechanics, and aircraft inspectors.
The honourable member for Camrose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that vocational training is a proven way to give students hands-on job experience, and given that I hear from students in my constituency about the opportunities presented by vocational training, like registered apprenticeship program, and further given the impending shortage of skilled trades workers in key industries, a problem which more apprentices could help address, could the Minister of Education advise how the government is working to increase the availability of vocational training in Alberta for students?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Well, Mr. Speaker, creating and expanding opportunities for vocational trades and just generally experiential learning opportunities for our students is a top priority of our government, primarily because we firmly believe that a trade certificate has the same value, merit and worth as a university degree. We're doing a number of things to help expand these opportunities. We are investing approximately $12 million over the next 3 years to expand career and technology studies programs as well as dual credit programs. We're also providing funding to careers, the next generation, to help expand the registered apprenticeship program, and more activities will be coming in the future as well.
The honourable member for Camrose.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Given that pursuing a post-secondary education is one of the most common paths students take before entering the workforce, and given that through open houses, presentations, post-secondary institutions themselves often inform students about the programs available for them to pursue, and further given the need to ensure these students are entering the post-secondary programs with a prospect of future employment, could the Minister of Education explain how he is working with post-secondary institutions so students receive the best program advice for the job market?
The Honourable the Minister of Education.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Of course, we work very closely with our amazing post-secondary institutions to ensure that students are aware of the breadth of career opportunities that are available to them. It's something that the government wants to work on facilitating as well. My mandate letter, of course, calls upon the government to work at expanding career fairs and create more opportunities for students to be exposed to different career options that may be out there. Of course, guidance counselors and other professionals in our schools also provide guidance, as do partnerships with our post-secondary institutions.
The honourable member for Calgary Acadia has a question to ask.
Mr. Speaker, we know that early intervention programming is essential for children with developmental disabilities, and we know that the demand has grown exponentially in the last 3 years. The Minister of Community and Social Services admitted in an email, and I quote, "Since 2020, the volume of applications has increased by 96%, end quote. So, knowing that, and knowing that families are struggling, why is this government not significantly increasing resources to support Albertan families and better resource FSCD.
The Honourable the Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we continue to fund FSCD to tune of about $250 million a year, Mr. Speaker. It is a program that is widely popular. It's actually run by families in partnership with Seniors, Community and Social Services. We had roundtables over the last 6 or 7 months with those families who have indicated to us that they like the program. In fact, their number one piece of advice was not to mess with the program, Mr. Speaker, so we won't be doing that. But as we continue to see population growth and different other things that take place, we have to continue to put in measures to be able to help deal with wait lists. We've invested in that way in Calgary, which I'll talk about in the next moment, the next question.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Acadia.
Mr. Speaker, given that families are waiting more than 6 months to receive FSCD after being approved, which is to say, or what they say is that it's due to staff turnover and limited resources, and given the amount of stress that this is adding to these families, what is the minister's plan to increase staff recruitment and retention and to ensure adequate resource allocation for services to children with disabilities? And why has he failed thus far?
The Minister of Seniors, Community and Social Services.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this government was the first government to actually increase wages for those who work with the disabled, Mr. Speaker, something that has been widely congratulated and thanked for this government going forward. We've also invested significantly in technology. Part of the challenges that we've seen with our wait list for our large programs, Mr. Speaker, was a lack of technology. We went through that process. Calgary, that had the largest waiting list when it came to children with disabilities, we put in a new computer system, new staffing programs, Mr. Speaker, and I'm happy to report that we reduced that wait list as a result of those efforts.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Acadia.
Given that there are hundreds of children on the wait list for FSCD funding, and it can take months to apply for and receive AISH funding, given that families need to apply years in advance to have PDD in place by the time their child turns 18, and given the need for more funding to ensure these families can get the supports they need, will the minister take action today to better resource Albertans with disabilities and show that they understand the lives and well-beings of Albertans matter?
The Honourable the Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this government's investing more in PDD than any government in history, Mr. Speaker. In fact, this budget just increased by, I think, around $40 million in the budget, now up to about $1.6 billion that we're spending on PDD going forward, Mr. Speaker. We're going to continue to do that. The Premier has put into my mandate letter also to look at that issue of transitioning from childhood to adulthood. We are going to be coming forward with a plan on how we're going to make that work within the system. We're actually working with my colleague in information and technology to be able to make sure that we can utilize technology to help individuals as they transition from youth to adulthood that are using our disability programs.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-McClung has a question to ask.
Mr. Speaker, my constituent Troy McInnes is a veteran who retired from the Alberta Correctional Service more than 3 years ago. He recently received a letter from Service Alberta demanding repayment of $441.04 resulting from a, quote, payroll system configuration error, unquote, just before his retirement. This matter has triggered Mr. McInnes' severe PTSD. He finds it nearly impossible to deal with the stress of this UCP bureaucratic malfunction. To the Minister, for how long will this government hound a retired public servant, a veteran, for a small overpayment that was the government's fault in the first place?
The Honourable the Minister of Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Speaker, and to the Honourable Member, please thank that your constituent for his service. It's appreciated. I don't have any more details on the situation, but I would encourage you to pass that information on to my office. I'd be happy to have my officials look into it. Here.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-McClung.
Given that on February 24th this year, Mr. McInnes received an emailed response letter from Service Alberta to an inquiry email made on his behalf by my constituency office, and given that the letter ends with an offer to discuss, quote, time to pay options, and Mr. McInnes is not in a position to take on another battle, and given that he deserves a resolution beyond time to pay options, it has probably already cost the Government of Alberta more than $441 to badger Mr. McInnes to recover the money they mistakenly overpaid him. What oversight is there to prevent this troubling situation from happening to other retirees out of government service?
The Honourable the Minister of Service Alberta and Red Tape Reduction.
Mr. Speaker, I regret that this situation has happened, and I agree with the Honourable Member. The faster that we can resolve this, the better. In fact, I would encourage that member that the next time anything like this happens, don't wait for question period to bring it up. Come on down to my office in 103. I'd be happy to help him out personally.
Order. The Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, I've already alluded to communications that have taken place between my office and the Minister's office, and it hasn't been resolved. That's why we're here today asking questions, Mr. Speaker. And given that Mr. McInnes feels he's not alone, and he wonders how many other retired provincial public servants are facing demands for payment to recovery systems, collection systems to fix system reconfiguration errors that are turning the early retirement years into a frustrating battle with a big ball of sticky red tape. Is there no statute of limitations on a UCP government policy of chasing people for clawbacks and collecting retirement benefits?
The Honourable the Minister of Service Alberta.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sure somewhere in there was a reasonable question, but I missed it. But here's what I'll say to that member. We have thousands of retirees in this province, and they get paid on time every time. But I don't doubt that with thousands that are retired, that occasionally one falls through the cracks. And I would encourage that member, contact my office. I'm in 103, Mr. Speaker, and I will personally make sure that this is looked into. I think that we want to recognize that individual service to this province and take care of this as fast as possible.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government has committed to improving emergency and surgical wait times. Budget 2024 invested $618 million in targeted spending to improve access to surgeries and acute care facilities that perform surgeries. Budget 2024 also included $313 million over 3 years for the Alberta Surgical Initiative Capital Program, which aids and expands operating rooms across the province. To the Minister of Health, how will the current initiative by our government help reduce wait times for emergency rooms and for surgeries in Alberta?
The Honourable the Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In addition to those targeted investments that the member highlighted, over the next 3 years, $3.6 billion has been committed to maintain or expand healthcare facilities across Alberta. Our government continues to work closely with AHS to improve wait times by coordinating efforts to ensure Albertans are getting the right supports in the appropriate places. We'll continue to do that, Mr. Speaker. We're taking action to improve patient flow through acute care facilities. We're also expanding care outside of emergency departments through innovative approaches. We're going to keep doing that, and we're seeing results, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and to the Minister. Given that some of my constituents have expressed concerns regarding wait lists for surgical operations like knee and hip replacements, and given that this UCP government is committed to reducing wait times, and further given that the latest data shows more Albertans are receiving these surgeries within clinically recommended times than at any other time since 2020. Can the same minister speak to what the government of Alberta is currently doing to improve surgical wait times? Good question.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, our government is working hard to ensure every Albertan receives their required surgeries within clinically recommended wait times. Mr. Speaker, in this year alone, or last year alone, we completed over 300,000 surgeries. That's up over 10,000 more than the previous year, Mr. Speaker. AHS also has recently entered into agreements with chartered surgical facilities in Edmonton and Calgary zones to complete up to 6,000 orthopedic surgeries annually, and Central Zone will also increase its annual capacity to provide 800 more hip and knee replacements. We're going to keep working, Mr. Speaker, to get this down.
Honourable Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and again to the Minister. Given that our government has managed to implement significant improvements to our healthcare system and aims to continue improving it, and further given the need to reduce wait times in pediatric emergency rooms and walk-in clinics, to the same Minister, how will Bill 22, the Health Statutes Amendment Act, further improve our healthcare system and reduce these wait times in our province?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, Bill 22 was introduced to help support Alberta's health care system refocus, transitioning from a single regional health authority to a more unified health system that refocuses on 4 priority sectors: primary care, acute care, continuing care, and mental health and addiction. Mr. Speaker, we are paving the way for better transparency, accountability, and organization. By enhancing government oversight, we can ensure the resources are directed to our front lines, supporting healthcare professionals and improving patient care for all Albertans. Mr. Speaker, this is enabling legislation which will get us to that next step. Thank you.
Honourable members, this concludes the time allotted for oral question period. In 30 seconds or less, we'll continue with the remainder of member statements. honourable member for Edmonton Meadows has a statement to make.
The UCP government for no one but themselves and their closest pals. Want proof? Just watch them. Healthcare is an absolute disaster. Our students are literally under attack. There is an affordability crisis in every industry, and where are the government's priorities? They want to get their hands on Albertans' pension through a new pension plan. No one asked for it. No one wanted it. They said they wouldn't do it, but off they went. They want to hold renewable energy down. The entire world is looking for ways to ensure our children and their children can live long, healthy lives on a planet that is sustainable and creating jobs in new sectors. And while the UCP turn their backs on what matters most to Albertans, the gravy train of goodies to their friends has finally choo-chooed its way right off the tracks. The Premier once decried the practice of governments feeding tax dollars to the begging mouth of their closest friends. Isn't it amazing what can be changed with the controls in one's hands? Remember David Jagger, the Premier's good buddy and former Wild Rose president. Well, the UCP decided that he was worthy of a $136,000 competition-free contract. Oh, and by the way, that was already his third such contract. They raised their gift limits, just what Albertans need. After all, what good are a sole source contract if all they can get is a $200 present in return? The UCP has only one clear mission, which is to be entitled to their entitlements. We all deserve much better. Thank you.
Presenting reports by standing and special committees. Presenting petitions, notices of motions, introduction of bills.
The honourable member for Calgary Buffalo has a bill to introduce.
Mr. Speaker. I am honoured to rise and request leave to introduce Bill 211, the Arts and Creative Economy Advisory Council Act 2024. If passed, this bill would create an Arts and Creative Economy Advisory Council with a mandate to collect provincial data and provide recommendations to the government on how to support and grow the arts and creative economy. Mr. Speaker, the creative industries are essential for Alberta. They improve the quality of life, support the retention of workers, attract business investment, and contribute to the economic vitality of this great province. The new bill will bring a new perspective to the arts and culture in Alberta, and I hope members in this legislature will support it. Thank you, sir.
Honourable members, the honourable member for Calgary Buffalo has moved. First reading of Bill 211, Arts and Creative Economy Advisory Council Act. All those in favour of the motion for first reading, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Bill 211, Arts and Creative Economy Advisory Council Act, is now read a first time. Tabling returns and reports.
The Honourable Official Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On behalf of my colleague from Lethbridge West, I'm tabling 5 copies of a letter from the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team wherein ACERT determines that there were reasonable grounds to believe that 2 officers had committed criminal offences by accessing that member's data in 2018.
Are there others? The Honourable Member for Edmonton McClung, followed by Highlands Norwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise this afternoon to table the requisite 5 copies of Don Braid's column, which appeared in the Journal and Calgary Herald this morning. It talks about Alberta legislation designed to turn Alberta into a, quote, united little state to fight Ottawa and stifle internal opposition.
Highlands Norwood.
Thank you. I'd like to table 5 copies of the April 2024 Inflation Review from the City of Calgary, just hot off the presses. I would like to flag for all members that the report points out that Calgary has experienced 3 of the top 5 highest rent inflations in Canada since 2000, all within the past 5 months.
The Honourable Member for Sherwood Park.
Mr. Speaker, I'm happy to table a news release from Alberta municipalities today in which they mentioned consultation from the minister. It was too bad we couldn't sit down and discuss our concerns about the controversial Bill 20.
Honourable Member for Calgary Bennington, followed by Lacombe-Panoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to table the requisite number of copies of an article I referenced in Bill debate yesterday from the Centre for Constitutional Studies, a nice little plain language walkthrough of cooperative federalism.
Member for Lacombe-Panoka.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to table the 5 requisite copies of a research article from the Election Law Journal out of Princeton University titled Ballot-making devices cannot ensure the will of the voters. I tabled these 5 copies in reference to an intervention I received yesterday about the hacking.
Are there others? Seeing none, the clerk.
Tablings to the clerk, deferred divisions.
Honourable members, that brings us to points of order. And at 2:06, the government House Leader rose on a point of order.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I did. I would like to withdraw that point of order and the third point of order, but proceed immediately to the second point of order, if it pleases the chair.
I consider both of those points of order dealt with, concluded, and withdrawn. That brings us to the second point of order, where at 2:17, the government House Leader rose on a point of order.
Yes, it did, Mr. Speaker. I will try to be quick. At the time noted, the member from... Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Make sure my ducks are in a row here. But the member from Calgary Foothills was asking a question. In the final line of his question, he said, will the minister agree with the concerns being raised about Bill 18, or is he, along with his government, so entitled that they will continue to push it forward? You cannot do indirectly what you cannot do directly. You cannot make an accusation against another member like that. I believe that would be imputing false motives. And under 23 HI and J, I think this is a point of order, given that it is directed at a specific member of the chamber.
The official opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I disagree with the government House Leader. This is not a point of order. The member is asking a question. The minister had multiple options. He does not need to be entitled, along with the government in this case. This type of framing a question in question period is commonly used, and I do not think that this is a point of order. I look forward to your ruling, Mr. Speaker.
Are there other submissions? I do have the benefit of the blues, and I am prepared to rule. The Honourable I have the benefit of the blues, however, they do not specifically speak to the Honourable Member for Calgary Foothills statements in the Assembly, and are primarily around while the Minister was speaking when the point of order was called. What I will say is that I always encourage members to not make personal or direct accusations about individuals. I'm not sure that in this case it rises to the level of a point of order, but I will provide a caution to the Honourable Member for Calgary Foothills. When crafting his question, it's unlikely to create order if he is making a direct accusation of a minister of the government. But in this case, it's not a point of order. Consider the matter dealt with and concluded. And that brings us to orders of the day, orders du jour.
Government motions. Motion number 32, Honourable Mr. Scow.
The Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to move Government Motion 32, which reads as follows. Be it resolved that pursuant to Standing Order 4.1, and for the duration of the 2024 spring sitting of the first session of the 31st Legislature, the Assembly shall meet on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings for consideration of government business, unless the Government House Leader notifies the Assembly that there shall be no evening sittings that day by providing notice under notices of motions in the daily routine or at any time prior to 6 p.m.
Honourable members, pursuant to Standing Order 4.1, this is not a debatable motion. So having heard the motion as proposed by the Honourable Government House Leader, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Government motion number 38, Honourable Mr. Scow.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I rise to move Government Motion 38, which reads as follows. Be it resolved that the membership of the Select Special Ethics Commissioner and Chief Electoral Officer Search Committee be replaced as follows. That Mr. Getson replace Mr. Yao as Chair. That Mr. Getson replace Mr. Yao. That Honourable Mr. Hunter replace Mr. Dick. That Mr. Roswell replace Ms. Pitt. And that Mr. Weeb replace Mr. Stephan.
Honourable members, pursuant to Standing Order 18.1H, this is a debatable motion. Is there anyone wishing to speak? Seeing none, I am prepared to call the question. Honourable members, all those in favour of Government Motion 38, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. In my opinion, the ayes have it. That motion is carried and so ordered.
Committee of the Whole.
Honourable members, I'd like to call Committee of the Whole to order. Committee of the Whole has under consideration Bill 20, the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act 2024. I see the Honourable Minister of Municipal Affairs rising to speak.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I rise today to continue the discussion on the Municipal Affairs Statute Amendment Act, and as part of that, I'd like to move the Committee of the Whole reading. I'd like to take some time to address some of the comments and questions raised in second reading. Before I do that, I intend to propose some amendments to the legislation at the end of what I do here. So since tabling Bill 20, I've had conversations with rural municipalities of Alberta, Alberta municipalities and mid-sized city mayors, caucus and other municipalities across Alberta. Through these conversations, they have indicated to me more clarity is needed around specific parts of the legislation. This includes the ability of Cabinet to dismiss a councillor and the ability of Cabinet to require a municipality to amend or repeal a bylaw. Madam Chair, while the province has always had the ability to remove a councillor through a ministerial process, so this is definitely not a new power, it was our intention to ensure that we were able to move more quickly in the exceedingly rare cases where a councillor needs to be removed due to public breach of trust and potential harm to the community. I recognize the concerns of our municipal partners, and I've listened. So, today we are tabling an amendment which repeals the most expedited dismissal process for a councillor. However, we will retain, and to be clear, Madam Chair, I may regret this, but in the spirit of working with our municipal partners, I've done this. However, we will retain the ability for Cabinet to order a vote of the electors to remove a councillor. This is similar to the recall petition process that can be launched by a resident. We are also amending the draft bill to clarify that this is about councillors who are unwilling, unable, or refuse to do the job of a councillor. In addition, we're clarifying that as part of the decision, we will consider illegal or unethical behavior by that councillor. Ultimately, the decision rests with the voters of the municipality, which is a good place for it to be. But again, I will reiterate that the removal of a councillor is a power that the province already has and has had since the Constitution.
Honourable Minister, I hesitate to interrupt. I might suggest that we actually move the amendment so the members can have a copy while you are speaking to it.
Always at the service of you, Chair. I'll hand in the amendments now at your request, and I'll wait for your go-ahead to say more. How's that?
This will be known as Amendment A1. Please note it is 3 pages. Honourable Minister, you may proceed.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank you for your guidance and how you'd like to see this proceed. And again, I'll reiterate that the power to remove a councillor is a power that the province has had essentially since the Constitution's been in place. And the ministerial order process remains as it always has been. Bill 20 seeks to provide a process for Cabinet to expedite that process should extreme circumstances occur. And I feel confident that our amendments continue to meet the objective by moving that decision to a vote of the electorate. Now, with respect to the amendments that allow Cabinet to repeal or amend any bylaw, municipalities have requested that we clarify under what circumstances Cabinet would amend or repeal a bylaw. Mr. Speaker, we again listen to our stakeholders. So rather than adding that definition in the regulations through consultations, we're tabling amendments, as we just did, to the section that will provide guidance on when this authority would be used. These amendments will clarify that this authority can be used in a few different circumstances. First, if a municipality passes a bylaw that exceeds the scope outlined in the Municipal Government Act. Second, if a municipal bylaw exceeds the authority granted to a municipality, either under the Municipal Government Act or any other statute. And third, if a municipal bylaw contravenes the Constitution of Canada. Fourth, if a municipal bylaw is in conflict with the Municipal Government Act or any other provincial statute. And fifth, if a municipal bylaw is contrary to provincial policy. Mr. Speaker, Madam Chair, pardon me, my mistake, my apologies. These amendments keep the intent of these sections while also responding to what our municipal stakeholders have told us. These changes make it clearer when the province could use this authority, which, as I had said previously in the Assembly, I expect to be rare. But I'd also like to remind everyone that the ability of the Cabinet to remove or repeal a bylaw is not a new power. For example, when the City of Edmonton kept their mask bylaw in place in 2022, at the time Alberta's government tabled Bill 4, the Municipal Government Face Mask and Proof of COVID-19 Vaccination Bylaws Amendment Act. That's a mouthful, but it was necessary because the City of Edmonton chose to act like the provincial health department, and that could not be let to stand. And later, let me say this also, Madam Chair, is that most laws happen this way. You know, at some point in time, speed limits were put on the highway, and you would think that people would obey the speed limits. But you know what happened? People went faster, in some cases put other people's lives at risk. And so laws were put in place with penalties for that. This is kind of similar, where we've always had the ability to remove councillors and to change bylaws, but due to examples where municipalities have gone really out of their lane and gone beyond their authority, it's kind of put us in the position where we need to strengthen the laws that are in place now to make sure that if these similar circumstances crop up in the future, we'll have the ability to more expediently deal with what's necessary. So later that day, and interestingly enough, after we passed that, the Edmonton Council voted in favour 8-5 to repeal the mandatory mask bylaw. But Mr. Speaker, there are plenty of other examples outside of Alberta, as well as in Alberta, where municipalities are making decisions that go outside of what municipalities are meant to do. There's a municipality in British Columbia, Nanaimo, that wants to ban natural gas heating in new homes. We would never, of course, let that stand in Alberta. We hope that we never have to stop it from happening, but that's some of the things that actually have happened in other municipalities. The City of Toronto is asking the province to decriminalize drug use, which is explicitly opposed by the province. And in fact, the province of BC actually has come to their senses and asked the federal government to take that away. But again, I want to be clear. We want municipalities to focus on doing the job that they are meant to do. And that is delivering critically important services to communities such as road maintenance, fire services, recreation services, and public libraries, among others. And when we, as the provincial government, will continue to focus on the job that we have to do under Canada's Constitution. So, one of those things that we have to do under Canada's Constitution is to regulate municipalities. A constitutionally, 100% constitutionally power guaranteed to municipalities, or to the provinces, and only to the provinces. So, when it comes to these two parts of the legislation, I'm pleased that we can provide more clarity in the legislation, as municipalities, some of them at least, have asked for. Before moving on, I want to provide one more set of changes in the amendments that I'm introducing, specifically with the request of the coming in force date of the legislation. Right now, Bill 20 comes into force on royal assent. However, there are several by-elections currently underway in various communities across Alberta, and we want to ensure they occur as smoothly as possible. So we will look to proclaim Bill 20 later in the summer after those by-elections are complete, because I hope we can all agree that changing the rules in the middle of an election is, generally speaking, a bad idea. So we want the rules to remain in place until the current by-elections are completed. So now to move on to some comments raised by members of the Assembly. Members across have claimed that there's a lack of consultation. Well, we've already covered that Madam Chair, I've tabled 2 consultations that were done last year, one on the Local Authorities Election Act, one on the Municipal Government Acts. I tabled them in the House. They've been available on the Municipal Affairs, the government website, for a long time, so that basically proves the consultation did take place. And in fact, the amendments that we're putting in place today actually really indicate the consultation hasn't ended, because comments that municipalities gave about the legislation were already listening and putting some amendments in place at their behest. So, and that kind of takes away the argument that the folks across have made that there was no consultation. It's just not true. I also want to begin by saying that we engaged extensively on the changes to the Local Authorities Election Act and on the Municipal Government Act. Bill 20 was tabled. Since Bill 20 was tabled, I've had conversations with municipal leaders in Alberta. I've spoken to the mayors of our 2 largest cities and many other municipalities across Alberta, and that's what led to the amendments I've introduced today. And this summer, we will, as we have confirmed, be consulting with municipalities on the regulations. We said that we were going to do that right from the point where we introduced the legislation, and we will honor that commitment. Engagement with our municipalities is important, and so is listening to Albertans. What we also must take action in areas where they see there are issues, specifically where we see a lack of transparency and accountability in the election process. Trust in election results is critical, and protecting the perception of fairness and transparency of local elections is important. Election processes must not only be fair, but actually be seen to be fair. For example, I'm aware that some people in Alberta don't trust tabulators. I'm not going to speculate on why they don't trust them, but what's most important, Madam Chair, is that the day after the election, when municipal councillors, mayors, and reeves are elected, they have very important work to do. They passed rules and bylaws that Albertans within those municipalities have to live by, and we need to make sure that those Albertans, whether they like who won the election or whether they don't like who won the election, must accept the fact that the people sitting in the council seats were actually the ones duly elected by the most legitimate voters within that municipality, and that should help to encourage respect for those duly elected municipal councillors, mayors, and reeves, and the decisions that they have to make and that people have to abide by, and we don't want people saying that that is not the case. So it's also why we made changes to the Local Authorities Act to strengthen the role of scrutineers. Our number one goal is, again, to make sure Albertans have trust in the process, and I believe these changes will ensure Albertans can trust the election processes. Albertans also want to know what the candidates in their ballot stand for, and they want the ability to make the decision about who to vote for with ease. For example, we have heard about municipal political parties. Madam Chair, we know there are party-like organizations that allegedly worked together in the last municipal election. In fact, we know this. They did it without any rules. That is not right. That is not transparent. Should Bill 20 pass, there will be rules in place to make any kind of political organization at the municipal level more transparent than in the past. As I've said this many times through speeches at Alberta municipalities and rural municipalities of Alberta, as well as in numerous individual conversations with local officials, this is not a new idea. And I will say to this House, as I've said to the municipalities since our initial consultation, local elections will remain local, but they certainly can be more transparent, and they will always remain voluntary. Albertans will not see a municipal UCP or a municipal NDP or a municipal Liberal Party or any municipal party affiliated with any provincial or national party in Canada, because we want local elections to stay local. Another thing that municipal leaders said they want, another example of us listening to those municipal leaders, doing that consultation and putting things in place that they asked for. So there will be no direct connection with federal or provincial parties, whether they're the same name or a different name, and we're limiting these parties to Calgary and Edmonton. Again, we at one point considered putting these rules in place for all 300 plus municipalities, and after listening, after consulting, after only 2 municipalities will have this in place, Madam Chair. So this is the 2 big municipalities are the place where party-like political organization is most prevalent. There are already some solid rules within the proposed amendments regarding political parties, but there are also some broad regulation-making authority as well, and we will work with our municipal partners to further define how these parties will work at the local level. At the same time, we'll also be working on other regulations, including a municipal election spending limit regulation. This regulation will also serve as a limit to fundraising for local campaigns. Again, we will work with our municipal partners on this regulation. We'll make sure that we set this limit so money does not become the driving force in local politics, but that local politicians can be elected based on their ideas, and that incumbents do not have an unfair advantage. As my colleagues across the aisle like to say, taking the big money out of politics. Mr. Speaker, banning corporate and union donations did not do that as the NDP promised. The evidence is black and white, plain to see. We see some comparisons, some corporations donating to third-party advertisers, and those associated individuals are often the same that donate to candidates. In fact, election financing got a whole lot less transparent after the NDP were in government. On average, candidates in Edmonton and Calgary were raising more in 2021 campaign than in 2017, exactly the opposite of what the NDP promised. And in 2021, one third-party advertiser raised a whopping $1.7 million, primarily through union donations, in order to support a slate of candidates. Slate, party, sounds pretty much the same. It walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, Madam Chair. So it doesn't sound like big money left local politics to me. The NDP's promise was not kept, but we are fixing that. We're providing transparency about financial backing for election candidates. It should be abundantly clear who's donating money and who they are donating to. If passed, Bill 20 will allow union and corporate donations within the established donation limits, and we will require incumbents or prospective candidates to report annually on the funds they have raised. So all donations will be above board, publicly recorded, and curbed by expense regulations, exactly the opposite of what the NDP created. Mr. Speaker, I can't think of anything more transparent than that. But there's so many more positive aspects to Bill 20 that I think I should take a minute to touch on, like how we are enabling municipalities, only if they want to, not requiring, but enabling, to require a criminal record check for local candidates. I know a lot of municipalities will probably not want to do that because we know that many municipalities have a hard time already attracting enough candidates to run, so they won't want to do anything to make it harder, probably, but that will still be their choice. This part of the election will give Albertans that assurance. We're also making orientation training for local councillors mandatory so locally elected officials can perform their duties and understand the rules and requirements of their position. I heard from some municipal leaders they thought they were going to have to take some university level course before they could start their work. No, Madam Chair, it will be a basic municipal elected person 101, and so that they actually know what legally they're required to do and what they're not allowed to do, just to keep everybody working in the same direction. And we don't get to a place where residents are complaining about how their councillor is not following the rules of their office. There are good practical amendments, Madam Chair. I also want to take a minute to address claims from members across the changes to the rules around vouching will make it harder for people to vote. Again, they are wrong. Mr. Speaker, again, that's not true. We want Albertans to have full confidence that only eligible voters are casting a ballot by permitting vouching for an elector's address only. But with that, we're actually making it easier for anyone to cast a ballot through expanding the use of special ballots. Now it will be easier and simpler to vote by mail for every registered voter that wants to. And not only that, our government is making it easier for our most vulnerable population to get identification through methods like the Edmonton Navigation and Support Centre. We are going to work hard to make sure every Albertan that needs to vote can easily get identification. Albertans should be able to expect free and fair elections, and they expect it to be a simple process to vote. That is exactly what we're doing, Madam Chair. That is not all the positive changes we're making through Bill 20. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the housing changes that are part of Bill 20, and I was proud to speak more about just recently with our Minister of Senior, Community and Social Services about this. These measures include fully exempting nonprofit subsidized affordable housing from municipal and education property taxes. Municipalities have told me they want the ability to support affordable attainable housing through taxation measures. We've listened again, we've consulted, we've listened again, and we've delivered this through Bill 20. This measure will directly help affordable housing providers reinvest more funds to build more affordable housing units for Albertans in need. Mr. Speaker, Madam Chair, again, sorry, the notes are not correct. My apology. Madam Chair, why on earth would the NDP want to scrap a bill that would help build more affordable housing is beyond me, but we're accustomed to them saying one thing and doing another. Bill 20 will also allow municipalities the ability to offer multi-year residential property tax exemptions. Some municipalities like Brooks have asked for this flexibility. They want it because it incentivizes both home construction and home ownership. How much time do I have, Madam Chair, if you don't mind? 2 minutes. Getting more homes built is always the goal, and this measure will help. That's why we require municipalities to offer some form of digital participation when it comes to public hearings for developments. It will also give residents the opportunity to participate. At the same time, we're restricting the ability to unnecessarily delay approvals on housing developments by holding extra hearings. But rather than preventing municipalities from simply holding new bylaws, we want them to move ahead. The opposition doesn't seem to care what's in the bill. They just care about getting their sound bites. The president of Alberta Municipalities was asked twice, April 29th, if the bill should be scrapped, and twice he said no. Madam Chair, the changes will improve in Bill 20 will improve the lives of Albertans. It strengthens and improves local elections. And I urge all members to support this bill and the amendments I have tabled. And with that, Madam Chair, I move to adjourn debate.
Having heard the motion to adjourn debate, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. That is carried. Honourable Government House Leader.
Madam Chair, I move that the committee rise and report progress on Bill 20.
That motion, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried. We shall now rise and report progress. The Honourable Member for Athabasca, Barhead, Westlock.
Madam Speaker, the Committee of the Whole has had under consideration certain bills. The committee reports progress on the following bill, Bill 20. Madam Speaker, I wish to table copies of all amendments considered by Committee of the Whole on this date for the official records of the Assembly.
Does the Assembly concur in the report? All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried.
Under Government Bills and Orders for second reading, Bill 22, Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024, the Honourable Minister Lagrange.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm pleased to rise and move second reading of Bill 22, the Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024. In November of 2023, I announced our government's intention to refocus Alberta's healthcare system. And for far too long, Albertans have been faced with a system that doesn't put them first. A system that's overburdened, hard to navigate, and unfocused in its efforts. This has been an ongoing problem for nearly a decade. It's been highlighted by long wait times for emergency care and surgeries. Families have been left without family doctors, and emergency rooms have struggled to keep up with the demand. These issues are not unique to Alberta. Provinces across the country are facing the same struggles. But our government has a bold plan to refocus the healthcare system to improve patient care and to better support our amazing frontline workers. The Health Statutes Amendment Act will lay the groundwork for a transformative journey toward building a healthcare system that not only meets the needs of Albertans today, but also paves the way for future generations to thrive. Through the Health Statutes Amendment Act, we are poised to usher in an era of efficiency, accessibility, and patient-centred care. The proposed amendments are not just bureaucratic changes, they represent a fundamental shift in how we approach healthcare in Alberta. By updating legislation to better enable governance and oversight of healthcare, we are laying the foundation for a stronger, unified provincial healthcare delivery system. These amendments would enable the creation of 4 new provincial health agencies focused on delivering the very best healthcare to all Albertans. These agencies will be responsible for delivering integrated health services and ensuring that Albertans receive timely access to care regardless of where they live. Through clear identification of roles and responsibilities, we will streamline operations and enhance accountability and improve transparency within our healthcare system. This would lead to improved patient care and better support for frontline healthcare workers who will work in organizations that focus on their expertise. Alberta's healthcare workers are not just the backbone of the system, they are its lifeblood. Our government has heard from thousands, and I mean thousands, of healthcare workers as we've engaged with them on the refocusing. One of our guiding principles has been to leverage the experience of healthcare workers and prioritize their well-being. As part of the refocusing, we've conducted one of the largest in-person public engagement series ever done by the Government of Alberta. We held 65 public in-person engagement sessions across the province to gather feedback from healthcare workers, patients, families, and caregivers about what is working in the current system and what needs to be fixed. Sessions were held from Fort McMurray to the Crow's Nest Pass, High Level to Medicine Hat, and dozens of communities in between. When we factor in telephone town halls and online feedback, we've received input from more than 18,000 Albertans and healthcare workers who will help us shape the way forward. Their input will help guide us in the right direction as we work to stand up these new organizations. This new system will also be informed by the experiences of Indigenous peoples in Alberta. We're meeting with First Nations, Métis and Inuit communities across the province to gather information that will help ensure that all patients, including First Nations, Métis and Inuit peoples, are treated with dignity and respect when accessing care. There's over 30 in-person sessions across our First Nations, Métis and Inuit communities. The Health Statutes Amendment Act includes amendments to the Regional Health Authorities Act, related consequential amendments, and the Health Information Act, some of which has not been updated since the 1990s. Madam Speaker, as part of these amendments, the Regional Health Authorities Act will be renamed the Provincial Health Agencies Act, reflecting the shift towards the more streamlined and sector-specific provincial health system. Proposed amendments ensure clarity in the roles and responsibilities of provincial health agencies and healthcare providers. This clarity is essential as we transition from a single regional health authority to a more agile and responsive system. Under the amended legislation, provincial health agencies would take on responsibility for operational planning and the oversight of clinical service delivery across the province. This would enable them to prioritize healthcare delivery based on the unique needs of Albertans. Furthermore, these amendments reinforce the authority of the Minister of Health to oversee the health system and set the strategic direction. It will also allow other ministers, such as the Minister of Mental Health and Addiction, to oversee their respective sectors. This clarity of oversight ensures that strategic direction is aligned with the evolving needs of Albertans, paving the way for a healthcare system that is responsive, efficient, and patient-centred. The legislative changes will also support the transition of staff from Alberta Health Services to the new provincial health organizations, while enabling Alberta Health Services to continue operating as a regional health authority. Ensuring stability is key throughout this process. There are no anticipated job losses for staff who transition into the new organizations, and every effort is being made to ensure that there are no interruptions to employment or to patient care. Unionized employees within Alberta Health Services who are transferred to the new provincial health agencies will have their collective agreements and collective bargaining processes confirmed through legislation and will continue to apply in the same way and it will continue to apply in the same way under their new employer as they do under AHS. This will ensure seamless care for Albertans until the new acute care health authority is established and AHS is transitioned to an acute care service provider. I want healthcare workers to know that we are here to support them through this transition and beyond, as we utilize their expertise to shape a healthcare system that better supports them and the patients they care for. The vision for this refocused system is ambitious yet attainable. It is a system where every Albertan has access to a primary care provider, where acute care is swift and efficient, where assisted living options are equitable and comprehensive, and where mental health and addiction services are integrated into the fabric of care. This is the future we are working towards, a future where healthcare works for Albertans. Madam Speaker, achieving this vision requires us not only to pass these legislative changes, it requires collaboration, innovation, and commitment to excellence. The Health Statutes Amendment Act would foster a culture of collaboration and integration within our healthcare system by providing governance and structure that supports its success. This will help further empower frontline workers and regional partners to drive change at the local level. Enhanced governance oversight will ensure that resources are directed where they're needed most, on the front lines, supporting our healthcare professionals and improving patient care. If passed, the Health Statutes Amendment Act would take effect this June, marking a significant milestone in our pursuit of better healthcare outcomes. Madam Speaker, Recovery Alberta, the Mental Health and Addiction Provincial Health Agency, is set to be operational this summer, with the other 3 provincial health authorities to follow in the fall of 2024. Each of these agencies will play a crucial role in realizing our vision for a healthier Alberta. That vision includes every Albertan having access to a primary care provider, reduced wait times for health emergencies, enhanced access to care, and comprehensive mental health and addiction services when and where Albertans need it. The critical improvements to transparency and accountability proposed in this legislation would support the successful refocusing of the healthcare system to one that is responsive, effective, and reflects the needs and priorities of Albertans today and for generations to come. Madam Speaker, therefore, I look forward to the debate and encourage all members to support Bill 22, the Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024.
Are there others to join the debate? The Honourable Member for Calgary Varsity.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. It is really with a lot of sadness that I have to speak to this bill today. It is a major mistake that this government is making to, instead of focusing on the things that are important in the healthcare system today, are instead spending a lot of money and effort and building distrust amongst workers by breaking up the system rather than bringing some focus, that's a good word, to many of the issues that we need to deal with. We knew long before they came forward with this bill that the big issues would be workforce. We need to retain our workforce, and we need to bring more teamwork into play. And by chasing doctors away, burning out nurses, annoying staff, demoralizing staff over the last few years, and now breaking things up into silos, that is not a way to build teamwork and bring focus towards building our teams. We know that wait times are a major problem and that they are growing. There are known ways of dealing with wait times. I'll give an example of when I was the leader of neurology for Calgary Zone. At the beginning, we had a wait time of 21 months for a general neurology appointment. We did well with emergencies, but that was a ridiculously long time. We worked with the primary care network leaders within the zone, and together, noting that these are two groups that would be in different silos in this new plan, by working together, we came up with strategies that brought that wait list down to 4.5 months. We used proven strategies, and it wasn't just a piece of IT that sorts people to different people, different providers. But we need to be able to work together on this at all levels. We also know that continuing care spaces is an issue. We know that we need to focus on that. But breaking things up and dividing them out so that you've got wholly different teams and you only have integration at the very top is not going to help this. In the past, when we were one, we could move budget dollars around, but when it was known and shown that by implementing some strategy at a different level, that we could overall save dollars. And so that was something that could be done more nimbly than we will get if we have a number of different silos. Separating out mental health and addictions really is also another major problem because, first off, mental health itself, mental health is health, and to take that out of health is ridiculous because it is so intertwined with everything we do in the healthcare system that we're only isolating people with mental health problems, which is the thing of the past. We used to have mental health hospitals, and then we knew that the better way of providing care and the least expensive way was to integrate mental health into the overall healthcare system. We know that focusing on addictions is a major issue. I'm not going to talk more on that because that's a whole topic unto itself. We also know that public health is critically important for the health of the population, and this government doesn't even know, can't tell us where they place that. I'm not sure that they believe that it actually exists. And yet public health was really one of the very first ways of focusing on health of populations. For example, moving latrines away from where the population was. And we do have huge mental health or public health issues that we need to deal with today. One of them is our understanding of the potential for more and more pandemics. We've been through one terrible impact on the wellness of people and on our economy and on everything we do, and we know that the world is set up for more of that. We learned that the virus COVID-19 was airborne, and we should be having a strong public health system to help guide us in how to manage airborne diseases in future. But not even significantly accounting for this is going to be a major problem, and public health crosses all of the 4 groups that are now separated out in this new design. We also have known that there's a terrible problem in the way we have cared for Indigenous people. And part of that problem has been because Indigenous health care is kind of an afterthought. It's added on. It might be discussed when new health measures are brought in. It's partly the responsibility of the federal government and partly more so of the provincial government. And we know that we need a focus to work on solving the problem of Indigenous health. And while I understand there is a new deputy minister in the health ministry, this is a big issue and needs all of the proper attention. We also know that rural health care is much more challenging for many reasons to deliver than health care within our cities. And part of that is that there's travel to get health care, and most specialists are going to be more centralized because in order to recruit and retain many specialists, they have to be working together to provide that care. And the very small populations more distally are going to have to travel in, but we should be looking at better ways of delivering health care to our rural populations and better ways of supporting them in the tremendous costs of travel. We also know that recruiting family physicians is most challenging the more rural an area is. And many of us acknowledge and know that there's a wonderful quality of life in rural areas, but if there's a smaller community, it might be more challenging for the individuals that may go there to have the right job for a partner, perhaps, or perhaps to have a cultural community that supports them or a religious community that supports them. There's many, many challenges that we have to be working on, and this dividing up into different pillars is not going to help us work together to get there. So yes, we need to focus, but we can focus without blowing up the system and spending probably $100 million separately on this, plus all the other money that will go with it, and taking away all the time that should be going into fixing our problems and instead going into moving the deck chairs around. The other things that are really important is that we need to be measuring all of our outcomes. What are the outcomes going to be here? Are they going to be shorter waiting lists? I hope so, and more people with access to family physicians. We need reliable ways of measuring that. And all we hear are counts off a registration website at the College of Physicians and Surgeons. We need to know what the workforce actually is that is working in different areas. Now that would be valuable, and that is something we need to be measuring, and we need to be reporting it. We need to have visible, timely dashboards where you can be proud about the progress that's being made. And all of these are being removed, or the definitions of what you're measuring are changing. And this is all creating a great deal of distrust. And we're not able to see where we're moving. The other big thing is the bureaucracy. We already know that it's long been known that we wanted to have more local control over the things that should be decided more locally. Instead, this is taking more things up to the top and building a whole new bureaucracy rather than putting those dollars into supporting both the frontline workers and the leaders at the front line so that they can make the decisions that are appropriate for that level. Creating more ministries is not going to put anything into solving the problems that we're facing in the system. The other thing that I would mention is that the top-down approach is not even taking into account the expertise of people who know what's needed in health systems. This is being decided based on ideology, and the system that's being designed has never been done anywhere. This is not what you do on a province level. We should be learning from others in other parts of the country, learning from what we know in Alberta, learning from other places in the world what works and what we need to focus on. This isn't going to solve any of that, and it's going to cost us a great deal more money, and it's putting the control into the hands of politicians. Really, the design of the system and how to run the business part of how you get your care delivered is not best in the hands of people who don't even understand the complexity of the system. The other things are that we want that this Act will do is that it may allow inclusion of more private operators in the system through the new health services delivery organizations. And we know from so many pieces of evidence that if we start bringing more private providers in, might I say the Dynalife fiasco, that we are going to end up with greater cost and crappy service. And we've seen this again and again when privatized cleaning was brought in. We know that the cleanliness decreases and there's more in-hospital infections. When we brought in Dynalife, we know that they just couldn't handle the complexity of the system and the system failed. We saw this in the past where the surgical, the beginning of outsourcing surgeries in Calgary, they weren't able to do even as many as in the public sector. Yes, we have lots of things to fix and improve upon. Our turnover time in our hospitals between OR cases is inefficient and too long. Why don't we fix that instead of contracting out? The other thing that is worrisome is that we are anticipating that more care will be delivered through the sort of debit card approach or the voucher system, and that is built in and still present in this piece of legislation. We know that a voucher system did not work in home care. There's very few people that need the service that have the capacity to manage, hire and manage a team. And the idea that this could be brought into long-term care is terrifying. This is going to be so harmful to our seniors and is nothing more than a way to shovel money to providers without getting care for individuals. The other thing that is that we realize that there is a new, one of the focus areas will be primary care. And we do need to focus on primary care, but that needs to be integrated, because one of the big problems we have in primary care is that it isn't connected to our hospital system. One of the main complaints I hear from people in primary care is that they can't get access to the health records, the Connect Care system in our hospitals. And now we're going to make another silo and disconnect things. It really makes no sense. We also heard about nimbleness, and I haven't seen any evidence of any nimbleness in this new system. Everything is always just a plan for a plan. We've been hearing about what we're going to do with primary care, and we just see more little dribbles of plans, and things aren't rolling yet. When are we going to get the teams built and start allowing physicians to have better and competitive ways of delivering care? We need competitive funding. We need to be competitive in our care providers. We need the wages to match, or we're just going to keep bleeding to other places. That's something we should be focusing on, not building up a bureaucracy. And we've also totally disregarded the planning teams that know our healthcare system. They've been working for years, looking at the data, looking at the needs, looking at what's available in different places, and yet they've played absolutely no role in any of this. And so we're disregarding the expertise of people who know the system. And these consultations that happened after the fact, after it was decided what's going to happen, these roundtable consultations, I've heard from so many people who went to them and they feel that they're just talking to the air, there's nothing being truly gathered from them. They're a total waste of time for all of the individuals. And so I really just want to summarize, say we're creating chaos, we're putting huge dollars and huge time and effort into creating an entirely fabricated, made-up system that will not work, and that we should be focusing on the things that Albertans need. And I'm now going to pass the time over to my colleagues to speak to this bill.
There others join the debate. The honourable member for Edmonton City Centre.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. I appreciate the opportunity to rise and speak to Bill 22. Madam Speaker, Bill 22 is not about improving care. It's about increasing control. It's part of a disturbing pattern from this government of increasing authoritarianism and centralization of power, of undermining local authority and capacity while increasing the size of government and bureaucracy. From a premier who has repeatedly made grand promises and failed to follow through, whether it's what she promises not to do, that being, installing an Alberta pension plan or pursuing a provincial police force, or the things that she promises that she will do, providing an income tax cut for Albertans or fixing the healthcare system in 90 days. Again, a government of grand promises and no results. This is a government that has consistently shown they are not there for Albertans, and it was interesting to me to hear the Minister of Health stand and say that for too long Albertans have been living with a system that doesn't put them first. Madam Speaker, for the past 5 years, Albertans have been living with a government that does not put them first. And there's been no better example of that than this government's utter failure with our public health care system, and indeed the deep damage they have done to it, and the deep damage that they are now going to be doing further with Bill 22, because, Madam Speaker, there is no rationale, none, for the massive changes that are represented in Bill 22, or for the new system design that it's laying the foundation to build. Or I should say, perhaps, that the rationale that they are putting forward is really the thinnest of fig leaves to conceal the actual intent of a drastic change that's already creating massive chaos in our healthcare system, a system that's already under enormous pressure and strain. To repurpose the introduction from the popular television improv show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? Welcome to the UCP government, where where everything's made up and the facts don't matter. Because that is what we are hearing. We are hearing a lot of doublespeak, Madam Speaker, about this government's intentions. What this government is doing with the healthcare system, which remains in crisis at this moment, would be akin to going to wildland firefighters and saying, we recognize you're in the midst of fighting some massive wildfires in multiple parts of the province, but you know what, while you're doing that, we're just going to redesign the entire system that you're working in. We're going to create 4 new divisions for each kind of fire, for grasslands, for forest, for underground and brush. Each one's going to have new managers, individual boards, report to a different deputy minister, who in turn will be part of a different board. They'll work to coordinate everyone with ultimate power, direct control over every aspect, being held by a governor, minister, and the premier. Those folks on the front lines just trying to fight fires are left wondering, well, who do I actually answer to? Who's going to be my employer? Who's going to sign my paycheck? Is my pay and contract going to remain the same? Who's actually making the logistical decisions to ensure that we're going to have the resources we need? And the response from government, Madam Speaker, is, well, just don't worry about that. Just trust us. Keep fighting those fires while we arrange and turn over everything around you. It's a recipe for chaos. And indeed, before Bill 22 is even tabled, before it's even passed, the mere planning and the groundwork to set up this arbitrary new system is already creating chaos for healthcare workers and patients who need care. And it is guaranteed, Madam Speaker, that it is going to create even more. To quote Dr. Stan Houston, he's a semi-retired physician who's worked internationally in primary care, practiced for 31 years as a specialist here in Edmonton. In his words, there is no chance the proposed restructuring will resolve the healthcare system's problems. In fact, the key question is just how much worse they will get. Dr. Houston points to a deep concern with this, again, utter reconstruction of the entirety of the healthcare system while workers are trying to do the work. He says one of the biggest costs is going to be an unavoidable period of paralysis. And we have seen this already, Madam Speaker. Under the government's previous term, 4 years, with their direct interference in the healthcare system, we saw these periods of paralysis, where for a substantial time nobody knows what decisions they can make, they don't know who they can talk to, they don't know how to get things approved, or just how things work in the new order. And I can tell you both myself, my colleague Dr. Metz, who spoke so eloquently against this bill, have been hearing exactly this from folks in the system already. Things are stalled all over the place. Important work is not getting done because of the uncertainty that's been created by this government. Dr. Houston talks about the impacts on recruitment. It's always one of the decisions, he says, that gets postponed during restructuring. We have seen this too, Madam Speaker, already. Orders not to hire, orders to hold off on positions, while folks on the front line are struggling. More chaos, more uncertainty. That's going to have more damage on the healthcare system and make it harder for Albertans to access the care they need. And I would say, Madam Speaker, in my view, chaos isn't just the result of this government's actions. I'd say it's the point. Chaos isn't just a bug in Bill 22. Well, it's kind of the feature. If we just take a look at what the Premier and the Health Minister's arguments have been for why they're proceeding with Bill 22. The Minister of Health, last week here in the House with the press, she said, I quote, the focus in 2008 was really to develop one regional health authority that was focused on acute care, but obviously Alberta Health Services is branched into so many other areas other than acute care. We've heard the Premier repeat the same. The thing is, that narrative, that statement is absolutely concretely false. It's a fever dream from an alternate universe. We know from a news release that came out exactly 16 years ago, May 15th, 2008, titled One Provincial Board to Govern Alberta's Health System, which stated the new Alberta Health Services Board will be responsible for health services delivery for the entire province. The new governance model is intended to strengthen a provincial approach to managing health services, including surgical access, long-term care, chronic disease management, and addictions and mental health services, as well as health workforce and access to primary care. AHS was never built only for acute care, Madam Speaker. The actual facts utterly contradict the claims that have been repeatedly made by the Minister and the Premier. They're either utterly misinformed or repeatedly choosing to promote a narrative that runs entirely contrary to the facts. Which leads us to question then, if why they say they are doing this is concretely, factually not true, why are they? Either way, the particular argument they're making to justify this massive overhaul represented in Bill 22 is clearly not true. It's an attempt to rewrite history. Another argument that they've put forward is that this overhaul is being supported by Bill 22 is necessary to fix a broken system. We heard the Minister repeat that here today. The system is broken and it's all the fault of AHS. And indeed, the Premier just today tweeted, AHS was not delivering the patient care Albertans expect. That's why we split the management-heavy AHS into 4 new units to deliver quality care faster. Madam Speaker, there is no question that the system is broken. We have hundreds of Albertans who have no access to primary care. Wait times for surgery of almost every kind are well below the national benchmarks. We're desperately in need of more space in continuing care. We continue to see high wait times in our big city ERs, regular ER closures in municipalities across the province. We desperately need more capacity in treatment and support for mental health and addictions. The Premier and the Health Minister, they're pointing their finger at AHS, but the fact is it's been under UCP governments that in every one of those areas of our healthcare system, we have fallen behind. Pretty much every area that they've attempted to reform, they have utterly failed. In fact, their attempts at reform have made things worse. They launched a war on doctors that decimated primary care. They claimed it was to root out fraud. They said they had to rein in costs, that it would improve access to care. It did not. What they did do was drive doctors out of practice, out of province. They wasted 3 years in the midst of a pandemic, simply undoing everything that they had done. My colleague, from Calgary Varsity. She talked about the Dynalife situation. This is one of the marquee reforms of this government that they swore would make things cheaper and more efficient. They spent 3 years working to put that contract in place, laying all of the groundwork to privatize those services. It collapsed in 6 months. It was more expensive. Alberta taxpayers had to buy out the system, and for the period that existed, before and after the election, for months, Albertans got far worse service, and indeed it jeopardized people's health and care. The Alberta Surgical Initiative, completely undermined by their own war on doctors. Top-down reckless interference with public health in the midst of a pandemic, leaving us short on anesthesiologists, OR nurses, all of the staff needed. We can't keep up with emergency surgeries right now. Calgary hospitals are diverting patients for emergency surgeries or acute surgery. And we have rolling surgical outages across the province. ERs continue to be backed up. Paramedics report they're back to waiting for hours in hallways with their patients. And that's not because of a failure of AHS, Madam Speaker. That is a failure of this government and this government's repeated interference in their work. Interference that's about to get even worse. Because Bill 22 is going to enable even more direct government control of every aspect of the healthcare system. As columnist Don Braid wrote last week, what they're doing is ensuring total political care over healthcare, end to end. The days when a governing board could argue with the government are long gone. It's in line, Madam Speaker, with Bills 18, 20, and 21, part of an unprecedented consolidation of power and control in the hands of government, to ensure that no one anywhere ever again makes a decision or takes an action that the Premier doesn't like. It's not about improving care, Madam Speaker. It's about increasing control. And that's made very clear by this government's direct interference in the fall vaccination campaign. Again, Madam Speaker, we saw some of the lowest levels of vaccination. We saw incredibly high numbers of deaths. We saw incredible impacts on the system, and that was not because AHS failed. It was because this government directly interfered because of political ideology and their political interests, and undermined the work of public health. We've seen this government directly interfering with public agencies across the province, including ISO, and then being, shall we say, less than factual with Albertans about it. The Premier violated the Conflict of Interest Act in attempting to interfere in a criminal court case, which flies in the face of the Premier's recent comments on her radio show, where she attempted to suggest, despite the fact that she just tweeted today that she is making this move because there was management heavy at AHS, which we know was false. They had some of the lowest administrative costs in Canada. But she said on the radio this weekend, well, hey, sometimes you need to have more decision makers, and more than one decision maker. I guess I take a different view because I come from a world where I've looked at how free enterprise works. And free enterprise, the reason you go into innovation is because you've got 1,000 different decision makers. She goes on to talk about 1,000 different people trying 1,000 different things. Some work and some don't, and you do more of what works, you do less of what doesn't. She says if you have a single decision maker in a system that's as complex and costly as healthcare, it's going to bottleneck every decision. But that is what they are setting up in Bill 22, Madam Speaker. Complete, total political control of the entirety of the healthcare system, disempowering the folks on the front lines, the folks with ideas. The Premier is creating more bureaucracy and management. She's just making sure this time it's directly under her control and the control of the Health Minister. But really, we know what the Premier is referring to. When she talks about 1,000 people trying 1,000 different things, what she is talking about there isn't about empowering healthcare workers, it's about another long-standing obsession to introduce more privatization in the healthcare system, more free enterprise. When she talks about 1,000 people doing trials and different things, I'd suggest what she's looking at is carving up healthcare supports and services that Albertans depend on, contracting them out to all kinds of private providers, and the result will be chaos. Because this is a government that isn't actually interested in governing, in regulating, and ensuring the quality of the services once the contracts are signed. We've seen that with Dynalife. We've seen that with motel medicine. This is a government that's about ideology. about taking revenge and tearing the public health care system down, about gutting public health in particular. Madam Speaker. So my time is concluding, I believe, in my opportunity to debate on Bill 22, at least at this stage. But I think I've laid out pretty clearly what my concerns are. And the concerns about the impacts this is going to have on the folks that are working so hard to hold our healthcare system together after years of neglect and attack by this government. And the millions of Albertans who are already struggling to access care in this system are going to face even more barriers and blue tape because of the decisions of this government as they attempt to remake the entirety of this system.
Are there others to join the debate? The Honourable Member for Edmonton Highlands Norwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. What an honour to rise to speak to Bill 22. You know, I'm so grateful for our health critic, the good doctor from Calgary Varsity, who's you know, a wealth of information, and I hope that the members opposite were listening to her remarks. And so too am I grateful for you know, our critic who was the critic throughout one of the toughest times in healthcare. That's a member from Edmonton City Centre. And so it doesn't seem fair that that I have to follow these two in comments on Bill 22. So for those watching at home, I'm just going to urge you to keep your expectations low for the next 10 minutes or so. You know, I want to just start as well my remarks by you know, throughout the pandemic, and I mean, I will add that despite what some in this chamber might say, that COVID is still a reality, and we need to remain quite cautious. But throughout the pandemic, peak pandemic, I often made it a point to give a shout out to frontline workers, and I think on this bill, Bill 22, it is quite timely to give a shout out to healthcare workers who I know, I can speak for myself, and I think a number of members on this side of the chamber, probably that side of the chamber as well, who've reached out and shared their concerns about Bill 22. I'll talk more about healthcare workers in a moment, but because my memory is terrible, I better do this first, and that is, I would like, Madam Speaker, to introduce an amendment on behalf of the member from Edmonton Northwest. I'm new here. You may need to remind me, do you need me to read in the entire amendment? I don't have my glasses on either, so this is just, I'm a mess
wait till
today.
I have a copy though, and I'll
provide
further instruction.
Perfect.
This will be known as Amendment RA1. Honourable Member, please proceed to read the amendment into the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. So the member from Edmonton Northwest moved that the motion for second reading of Bill 22, the Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024, be amended by deleting all of the words after that and substituting the following. Bill 22, Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024, be not now read a second time because the Assembly is of the view that the reorganization in the healthcare system resulting from the legislative amendments proposed by this bill, if enacted, will destabilize and create inefficiencies regarding effective patient care in the healthcare system, resulting in negative impacts for patients and healthcare workers. Right? Sounds pretty good.
Does sound good.
We're good? Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, yeah, I mean, exactly that, and I will urge all members of the chamber to read this amendment and to actually thoughtfully consider it. The destabilization creating efficiencies at a time when, as I noted earlier, I mean, our healthcare system is under so much strain. I want to start by just talking a little bit about what the government says Bill 22 is going to do. They're noting that Bill 22 is going to enable the government to take the necessary next steps to refocus the province's healthcare system, ensuring that Albertans have a health system that prioritizes their need to find a primary care provider, get urgent care without long wait times, have access to the best continuing care options and supports, and have access to comprehensive mental health and addiction services across the province. Well, Madam Speaker, that all sounds wonderful, and on paper, absolutely, none of us in this chamber would disagree that all 4 of those key points are areas in which areas that need to be strengthened in our healthcare system. However, as has been pointed out by my colleagues, the previous speaker to this bill, while that might sound great, there is a whole heck of a lot of opposition to this. And as our health critic noted just earlier, I mean, this is nothing more than an additional step from this government to create more control in the Premier's office. It's a blueprint to escalate the chaos in our hospitals and clinics, and that will do nothing to improve results for patients or support staff. You know, I was a teacher in rural Alberta. I've talked about it a lot in this chamber, especially when we're debating education bills. And, you know, our focus, I always reminded, when I was an administrator, vice principal in Forestburg, Alberta, shout out to Forestburg if anyone's watching, we'd always remind our teachers, you know, we'd talk about why we were there, why we were in the classroom. We were there for our students, right? You talk to healthcare workers, they're there for their patients, right? You want to provide the top quality care that you can for your patients. Instead, we have a Premier who wants to control everything. This giant bill, this Frankenstein of a bill, is just going to further the dismantling of Alberta Health Services and stuff those very patients into ineffective silos. You know, oh gosh, time is always confusing to me, but probably a week or two ago, our health critic and the member from City Centre and I believe the member from Edmonton Riverview stood with the daughter of a patient who had been receiving care in the hallway of a hospital for more than 2 weeks. And in fact, her name is Patrice Koshman, the daughter. She was she's my constituent, and she reached out to my office. It's very loud in here.
Well, members, there's a lot of chatter. I can't hear the member who has the floor. If you would like to have conversations, the lounge is a great place to do that. The honourable member from Tin Highlands Norwood.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was getting a little loud in here. I just thought it was my inspiring comments that were instigating that, but I'm imagining it's because of the big Oilers game tonight that people are excited, and I don't blame them. So getting back to the patient that was in the hallway of an Edmonton hospital for 2 weeks. Patrice Koshman is his daughter, and she's my constituent, and she reached out to my office and shared the horrifying details of the patient care that he was receiving, or the lack of care that he was receiving. He's an 81-year-old retired civil servant, someone who'd dedicated decades and decades to this province, someone who, like all Albertans, regardless of their background or what they did, someone who deserved. He built this province. He deserved access to quality patient care. What he got was the absolute opposite of that. He was left in a hallway next to a nursing station for over 2 weeks before falling after trying to use a washroom in another patient's room. And as my colleague from Calgary Varsity pointed out, I mean, we should be treating seniors like James with dignity. They shouldn't be left waiting for care in a hallway or sent down the highway to a motel. Because I think about the fact that all of us, I mean, we may not be needing that care right away, but at some point we will be. Many of you in this, I know folks on our side of the chamber, I know many of you have dealt with aging parents, right? We all want the best care for folks in our lives, for our loved ones. So, you know, I think I think about that patient, and that's just one story. And I know when I posted about that on social media, coming back to healthcare workers, I had a whole bunch of healthcare workers, not a lot of them publicly, a few did in comments publicly. They just shared like, this is common. This is, you know, as sad as that story is, this happens a lot. And I said, you know, you're right. But we still, you know, the NDP opposition, we still wanted to highlight that story because it was a heartbreaking one. And my fear, I share all of this. I share the example of this one patient, this one example, because, you know, under the new plan, Bill 22, what would have happened to this patient? What will happen to future patients? How many different departments, managers, ministries would need to answer to his care under this chaotic plan? Nothing in this giant Bill 22 supports patient care. It's all about funneling even greater powers into the Premier's office. And don't just take our word for it. Don't just take, you know, the NDP opposition's concerns about this bill. There are a whole lot. Thank you. And, you know, if the members up there were being so great, they were being so quiet and listening so attentively. But if they want to join debate, I'd be happy to hear them. You can intervene, in fact, if you'd like. Thank you. I am doing a great job. So I want to talk a little bit about, you know, what healthcare workers are saying about this bill. The representatives of actual healthcare workers across this province are incredibly concerned. Let's talk about AUP. Vice President Sandra Azikar pointed out that the UCP's plan to ram through these significant changes through Bill 22 are alarming. We know, she points out, we know frontline workers are adaptable, they're nimble, they're willing to change. We've seen that. These healthcare workers, these healthcare heroes, did all they could and a whole lot more throughout the pandemic. We know what we're capable of. But when you throw workers who are already short-staffed, overworked, and burnt out into a major systemic overhaul, you create chaos and you're more likely to do more harm than good. And she goes on to say, this does not make healthcare workers feel seen and valued. In fact, it may drive more healthcare workers away from their jobs and do nothing to improve morale or retain or recruit workers. So at a time when we should be supporting healthcare workers, we should be focused on attracting and retaining healthcare workers. The UCP instead are driving healthcare workers away. So I would urge all members of this chamber to consider our amendment, to not read this bill a second time, go back to the drawing board, listen to those healthcare workers, and kill Bill 22. And with that, Madam Speaker, I would like to adjourn debate.
Having heard the motion to adjourn debate, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. So carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Yes, Madam Speaker. I rise to request unanimous consent for 1-minute bells for the remainder of the afternoon sitting.
We'll ask only one question. Is anyone opposed to 1-minute bells? Please say so now. 1-minute bells has been granted unanimous consent.
Under government motions, motion number 39, Honourable Mr. Scow.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to move Government Motion 39, which reads as follows. Be it resolved that when further consideration of Bill 21, Emergency Statutes Amendment Act 2024 is resumed, not more than 1 hour shall be allotted to any further consideration of the bill in second reading, at which time every question necessary for the disposal of the bill at this stage shall be put forthwith.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Boulard-McCall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's again a sad day for democracy, for the legislature, that Government House Leader has now moved another time allocation motion on an important piece of legislation, and that's, I believe, their close to 50th time allocation motion they have put forward. And what this motion does, this motion limits the ability of members to speak to this important piece of legislation. And if we take executive out, there are quite a few private members on both sides. And the time that Government House Leader has allocated, even member will not get 1 minute on this piece of legislation. I think I would urge the private members of the House government backbenches to think about it. This is executive. Executive is trying to curtail debate, trying to limit the role of this legislature, and ram through their agenda without consultation with Albertan and without any regard for the debate in this House. I think it's heavy-handed. It's becoming a routine practice for this government. Such motions are exception to the rule, but now for this government, I think that's how they operate, that they will table a bill, and after a few speakers, they will bring in time allocation and ram through their agenda. I think that's unacceptable. That's not what Albertans expect from this House. They want their representatives to be able to debate, but this government, this executive, is curtailing debate and limiting the role of this legislature in ways that we have not seen before. So I urge all members of this House that think about your role, think about the role of this legislature, and stand against these heavy-handed practices of this executive. So I urge everyone to vote against this motion.
Honourable members, Government Motion 39. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. That is carried. A division has been called. Ring the bells. Honourable members, the division has been called on Government Motion 39. All those in favour, please stand.
The Honourable Ms. Smith. the Honourable Mr. Guthrie, the Honourable Mr. Dreeshen, the Honourable Mr. Nicolaides, the Honourable Mr. Williams, the Honourable Minister Lagrange, the Honourable Mr. Horner, the Honourable Mr. Scow, the Honourable Mr. Ellis, the Honourable Mr. Amory, the Honourable Mr. Newdorf, the Honourable Mr. Lowen, the Honourable Mr. Wilson, the Honourable Mr. Jean, the Honourable Mr. Glubish, the Honourable Mr. Nixon, Mr. Long, Mr. Rosewell, the Honourable Mr. Turton, the Honourable Mr. Yassine, the Honourable Mr. McIver, the Honourable Ms. Furr, the Honourable Mr. Jones, the Honourable Mrs. Sawney, Mr. Getson, the Honourable Mr. Sigurdsson, the Honourable Mr. Nally, Mr. Yao, Mr. Van Dyken, Mr. Sear, Mr. Lunty, Mr. Wiebe, Mr. Boychenko, Mr. McDougall, Mr. Wright, Mrs. Petrovic, Mr. Stefan, Mr. Dick, the Honourable Ms. Armstrong-Homenuk, Ms. de Young, Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Bouchard, Mr. Singh, Ms. Lovely, Mrs. Johnson.
Any opposed, please stand.
The Honourable Mr. Sabir, Dr. Metz, Ms. Renault, Member Irwin, Mr. Ip, the Honourable Mr. Egan, Mr. Diol, Member Boparai, Mr. Shepherd, the Honourable Mr. Schmidt, Ms. Goring, Ms. Pancholi, Mr. Dack, Member Loyola.
Madam Speaker, total for the motion 45, total against 14.
Honourable members, that is carried. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Did you say that? All right. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise to move Government Motion 40, which reads as follows. Be resolved that the 20 Municipal Statutes Amendment Act 2024 is resumed. Not more than 1 hour should be allotted to any further consideration of the bill in Committee of the Whole, at which time every question necessary for the disposal of the bill at this stage should be put forthwith.
Any members wishing to join the debate? The Honourable Member for Edmonton North West.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And certainly, again, this is an obvious affront to democracy. But, you know, there's a different level, Madam Chair, with this particular choice for time allocations on Bill 20, because, of course, just a few short minutes ago, the same government dropped a whole plethora of amendments to Bill 20 just the same afternoon. And so we presume, after all of the debate, and certainly it's not just been in this chamber, this debate has been taking place all throughout the province of Alberta, this anti-democratic sort of grab for power, trying to control everything all at once, all of the time, here in the province of Alberta, in this case with the Municipal Affairs Statutes Amendment Act, right? And so the government has faced a tremendous amount of pressure on this. It's out amongst, Madam Speaker, not just amongst political types, but it's out in the public's eye as well. I've not seen a bill of this type being spoken about by people in passing, having dinner or coffee or, around the water cooler. People are talking about this government reaching into municipalities, reaching into councillors and mayors and elected officials all across the province and curtailing their democratic elected right to govern at a municipal level. And so I guess the government's been listening a little bit because they dropped a whole whack of amendments into Bill 20, but that just happened maybe an hour ago. And so an hour and a half later, suddenly they are putting in time allocations so that we can only debate this whole new bill for an hour. I mean, the irony of that and the ridiculousness of that is not lost on people. And so I can tell some of the new members here on the UCP side, I'm sure that they've been reassured by the veterans and the Brain Trust, or whatever they have over there for Brain Trust, that, people don't worry about time allocations. The public won't...
The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
The member is passionate. We ask him to please refrain from language, including "what the hell," which is inflammatory, inappropriate.
Mistaken. Honourable Member for Calgary-Buller-McCall.
That member was speaking to the motion, time allocation motion, and how government is doing overreach with their motions by limiting debate in the legislature, by limiting the role of this legislature, and by walking roughshod over the concerns of so many Albertans. I don't think it's a point of order. And also, member did not reference any section of the standing order. So I urge you to find it not a point of order.
Yeah, I didn't hear the accusation that was said. With a small amount of time here, I know the honourable member is very seasoned in this chamber, certainly wouldn't do anything to cause disorder in this House, and I'll ask him to continue with his remarks.
Absolutely not. I mean, I can't remember ever swearing, ever. So there you go. So anyway, I mean, it's obvious when people say, oh, well, the time allocation, who cares? We can just do that. Not in this case, Madam Speaker. It's a completely different situation when you not just have Bill 20, but you also have Bill 18 and Bill 22, all of them pulling to try to consolidate power into the provincial, into the cabinet and to the Premier's office. And so people are not lost on that. And suddenly, here we have, again, I've just been keeping count here since the UCP did form government here 5 years ago. I believe this is the 50th time that they've used time allocation during that time. So it's like the 50th anniversary of using this anti-democratic process. I mean, you got to use it sometimes, right? I mean, I think we did probably 4 times when we were government. These guys have used it 50 times in the last 5 years. And so that's undemocratic, that's one thing, but layering it on top of that with these very controlling bills, like Bill 20, a bill that they just dropped a whole bunch of amendments and changes on an hour and a half ago, that is patently and obviously and categorically ridiculous.
Honourable members, on government motion 40, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, please say no. No. That is carried. A division has been called. Ring the bells. Honourable members, a division has been called on government motion 40. All those in favour of the motion, please stand.
The Honourable Ms. Smith. the Honourable Mr. Guthrie, the Honourable Mr. Dreeshen, the Honourable Mr. Nicolaides, the Honourable Mr. Williams, the Honourable Minister Lagrange, the Honourable Mr. Horner, the Honourable Mr. Scow, the Honourable Mr. Ellis, the Honourable Mr. Amory, the Honourable Mr. Newdorf, the Honourable Mr. Lowen, the Honourable Mr. Wilson, the Honourable Mr. Jean, the Honourable Mr. Glubish, the Honourable Mr. Nixon, Mr. Long, Mr. Rosewell, the Honourable Mr. Turton, the Honourable Mr. Yassine, the Honourable Mr. McIver, the Honourable Ms. Furr, the Honourable Mr. Jones, the Honourable Mrs. Sawney, Mr. Getson, the Honourable Mr. Sigurdsson, the Honourable Mr. Nally, Mr. Yao, Mr. Van Dyken, Mr. Sear, Mr. Lunty, Mr. Weeb, Mr. Boychenko, Mr. McDougall, Mr. Wright, Mrs. Petrovic, Mr. Stefan, Mr. Dick, the Honourable Ms. Armstrong-Homenuk, Ms. de Young, Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Bouchard, Mr. Singh, Ms. Lovely, Mrs. Johnson.
Those opposed, please stand.
The Honourable Mr. Savier, Mr. Kozowski, Dr. Metz, Ms. Renault, Member Irwin, Mr. Ip, the Honourable Mr. Egan, Mr. Diol, Member Beaupry, Mr. Shepherd, the Honourable Mr. Schmidt, Ms. Goring, Ms. Pancholi, Mr. Dack, Member Loyola.
Madam Speaker, total for the motion 45, total against 15.
Honourable members, that is carried.
Under government motions, motion number 41, Honourable Mr. Scow.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to move Motion 41 reads as follows. Be it resolved that when further consideration to Bill 22, Health Statutes Amendment Act 2024 is resumed, not more than 1 hour shall be allotted to any further consideration of the bill in second reading, at which time every question necessary for the disposal of the bill at this stage shall be put forthwith.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Highlands, Norwood.
Wow. It's truly shameful to have to rise once again and point out that this government is once again limiting debate on a bill. This time, it's on Bill 22. Take a look at this bill. A huge bill that does absolutely nothing to improve results for patients, for staff, a bill that is nothing more than a plan to centralize more control in the Premier's office, and a bill that healthcare workers are speaking out against at a time when we should be uplifting and supporting healthcare workers, at a time when we should be doing all we can to support and strengthen patient care. This is the bill that the UCP are jamming through. And so we all will need to go back to our constituents who are asking us questions about Bill 22, about Bill 18, about Bill 20.
Member, I hesitate to interrupt, but the House stands adjourned until Monday at 1:30 p.m. Order.